across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. Rip-roaring show ahead of you. Lots to talk about. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Always a pleasure, as you know, to have your company. And if you are missing any of the show, you've missed anything from yesterday, Rip-roaring show yesterday as well, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be discussing Angela Rayner saying that Labour is running out of time under Keir Starmer, saying they're risking becoming the party of the establishment. I mean, you literally are the party of the establishment, Labour. But also Donald Trump's latest attack, not just on Keir Starmer, but on the BBC, over corrupt and fraudulent coverage of the Iran war. I mean, he's right about some stuff, isn't he? He's right about some stuff. Plus, that British Muslims are 5 times more likely to have a positive view of the Iranian regime than the wider public. I think we may have a problem, folks, and plans to legalise assisted dying in Scotland have been rejected by MSPs. Not the narrow vote that many had predicted either. But again, the votes in favour of assisted dying, assisted suicide, basically going up and up and up in Scotland every time they do this, and the same for the UK. It does look like the Westminster UK-wide assisted dying bill, that is also likely to fail, simply running out of time in the Lords. And thank heavens for the Lords on that one, eh? We'll talk about all of that, plenty more besides. I would love to hear from you, and as you know, you get to choose what you want to talk about, because it is a small matter of war in the Middle East. There is an awful lot to talk about in other areas as well. The meningitis outbreak that was just in Kent, and now we've got a case in London. Looks like it's spreading. Massive failures by the UK HSA, the UK Health Security Agency, in terms of notifying people in time. We'll talk about all of that as well, and your thoughts on that, very, very welcome. But in particular, would like to hear your thoughts on the former Deputy Prime Minister, until just 6 months ago, Angela Rayner. She's launched a direct challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership. I mean, it's not even we were going to call it a thinly veiled attack. It's not. It's a clear direct challenge. In a speech she gave to a soft left pressure group with ties to Andy Burnham, set up basically to challenge Keir Starmer's leadership. And it's called Mainstream. And she warned that the party is coming to resemble the establishment since taking power. She said that it was running out of time under Starmer to change course. She said that we would face defeat at the ballot box, she said, Labour, if they did not change course. And she said that the government's plans on migration were un-British. These are plans to basically change the law, so including the Boris wave of arrivals, and their huge, many hundreds of thousands, numbers, millions indeed, that they're right to basically leave to remain in this country permanently, the permanent settlement, that they would have to wait 10 years rather than 5. She says that is un-British and a breach of trust. Could wonder whether there's been a breach of trust of the British people, who never agreed to have that many people come to this country, let alone give them British citizenship and the right to stay here forever. But anyway, love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text us and send the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X as well, at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard rate, network rate message. Of course, yeah, tweets are for free. But what do you make of Angela Rayner's direct challenge to Keir Starmer? Would you rate her as a possible new Prime Minister? Did you rate her as Deputy Prime Minister? Should we wait for her to pay back that money to HMRC first? I don't know. Why does she even need to do that job being PM? She's already earning about 100k apparently just since leaving office in 6 months from making speeches. But it's all that based on the fact that people expect her to be back in power. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Delighted to welcome to the show. Again, it's all very confusing. Everyone keeps swapping around, whether it's breakfast show hosts and lunchtime hosts and my friends in the studio different days. Totally throws me, because now I'm convinced it's Tuesday. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, joins us today. A very good morning to you. Angela Rayner, what's she up to?
Well, she's on manoeuvres, isn't she? Both against Keir Starmer and probably for herself in terms of any future leadership bid.
How very dare you?
No, exactly. I'm a very cynical observer of these matters. And it just is another reminder that whoever's leading the Labour Party, they're still woefully out of touch. Of course, Labour
and
is
he
the
comes
party.
from the left.
Of And this thing about
I keep
Labour
pointing this out.
I know they won't have me anyway, so it's sort of a moot point. But her suggesting that Labour are the party of the establishment, or risking looking like party establishment, that horse has bolted a very long time. The reason you know that Labour is the party of the establishment now, like actually the natural party of the establishment, is even when they weren't in power for 14 years, pretty much everything they wanted to happened anyway.
That's a very good point.
I think that is a really good indication.
People have this idea of the establishment, which, you know, it's old Tories, men, old buffers, and, you know, the civil service was doing their will. And that was what it was like. It doesn't matter who was in power, that's what it was like. But there has been a change since the Blair years, especially with all the sort of creating of these all these different quangos and the like. So basically, Tony Blair's been in power since 1997. I mean, in terms of policies, in terms of people running the BBC, the NHS, the civil service, the police. I would say even the military. I mean, you are literally
the Conservative Party.
The Conservative Party. They're basically all New Labour, aren't they? I mean, that's where you are. But she says that Labour's running out of time to change course. Is the Labour Party capable of changing course? I mean, it's not capable of staying on the same course on the basis that Keir Starmer can't get anything done because he's got a load of lefty backbenchers who are now terrified for their jobs and of losing them to the Greens and want them to go even further to the loony left.
Yeah, and I think in terms of reversing course, it's maybe putting them in better stead to be the largest party in a coalition government after the next election. We're not talking about getting back to the sort of dizzying heights of that landslide they won last time around, although it was very much a loveless landslide, as many people have said. But the fact of the rhetoric here, particularly around the migration issue, I think is really telling. Either Angela Rayner is completely unaware of the fact that something like 2/3, 3/4 of the public will completely disagree
including
with her
Labour voters.
Absolutely. You even poll Green voters, and almost 50% of them think the asylum rules need to be tougher.
Yeah.
There is no division on this question in the country. It's only amongst the political parties that you see this divide.
And the BBC.
And the BBC. Or she is aware of that, but she's realised, as I think some of the smarter people around Labour have, is that it's very much a kind of shoring up the core vote strategy, that they've lost a lot of those working class voters they managed to claw back at the last election, and now it's very much about the students, the young professionals, the sort of Zach Polansky vote, and shoring up their support amongst them. So it's one of those two things, but neither of them suggest that the Labour Party's in rude health.
Indeed. I mean, it's interesting. She was saying, as a party and a movement, we cannot hide, we cannot just go through the motions in the face of decline. There's no safe ground for us. We're running out of time. The change that people wanted so desperately to see needs to be seen. Bearing in mind, that was literally all Labour promised, that change. There were very few specific policies, and such as they were things that we promised we won't do, like raising taxes and on families and things like that. Oops. But she says it needs to be felt. We have to show that it's a Labour government that will deliver it, and many of you in this room, she says, will deliver that for us. Our party is your party. We have to come together in the face of division and hate and make sure that the Labour Party represents the ordinary working people of this country, and I'm there with you, as she says. But she's, I mean, again, they're obsessed with the idea that there's all this division and hate in this country. To me, the only people dividing anybody are the people on the left. And they're the people who sort of go, oh, look at you on the right, stirring up all that hate and division and culture wars. Like, no, we were just living our lives, and then you imposed all this madness on us, and we're just standing up to it. But it is interesting talking about the establishment, but also I think crucially these migration reforms as un-British. I think that is absolutely fascinating because, again, do you know what? I'm not actually massively impacted by mass uncontrolled immigration of low-skilled labour. You might question how much skill it involves to do this for the morning, but and you're entitled to do that. I've done harder jobs, standing up jobs, waitressing. I've done harder jobs, but the key thing is.
But you do have to be able to speak English to do this.
Yeah,
job,
speaking.
So
I don't know. I gabble it sometimes. I'm not sure everyone will understand it every time. But it's not. They're not taking my job. They're not taking my job. They're taking the jobs of people who are should be natural Labour voters. They're taking young people's jobs. I've got a teenager who's massively highly skilled, really motivated. The difficulty of getting a job, it's unbelievable out there. And they are taking the jobs. These people go, oh well, they're doing the jobs British people don't want to do. Well, British people would do those jobs if there was no benefits. But the impact of this mass immigration is most hurtful to working class voters.
No, absolutely, and everyone knows that. You see it in the employment figures. You also. There's also an interesting question about whether or not the kind of migration system that we've had for the past couple of decades is fair and just for anyone really at all. I mean, in terms of large sections of the NHS or social care sector being reliant on us kind of creaming off the nursing graduates and the people from various parts of the developing world and just taking them and sticking them in our own health service. That's not obvious to me. The fact that particularly over the past decade we seem to have kind of imported an entire serf class of people whose primary benefit to the employers they work for is that they will work for very little.
Or Zach Polanski, they'll wipe people's bums and he doesn't want to do it.
Exactly. Polanski's bum wipers and all the rest of it, the Deliveroo riders, all. This is something which, are we really comfortable with an economy that requires that level of
But as that lady on Question Time said over Brexit, who's going to make my coffee in Pret in the morning?
Well, that's another thing, because it wouldn't have been too long ago that who would have made your coffee in Pret in the morning, or who would have, maybe delivered the pizzas or whatever, would have been a teenager, someone starting out, someone who needs a little bit of extra money. But we've completely, completely kind of warped our own job market.
Also, because we want to pay less for that stuff. Although, frankly, have you tried buying a coffee at a coffee shop lately? But anyway, I mean, I tell you who definitely could afford a coffee anywhere or delivery is Angela Rayner. She's earned £100,000 from speeches just in the last 6 months.
Not too shabby.
I know, exactly. But interestingly, also Angela Rayner, I'm definitely a socialist and I'm proud to be one. It's now, you can be a champagne socialist, that's fine. You can be rich, you can say, I want everyone to earn 100 grand from giving utterly pointless speeches on the basis they may one day be Prime Minister of this country. I mean, but I just don't know if that's open to everyone. Yes,
and I think also because of her creative accounting and tax affairs hanging in the background, you're going to have these brickbats thrown at you, aren't you? I mean,
she hasn't paid that money back. She was the head of a housing department. When she did Prime Minister, she was housing secretary. They brought in a rule about second homes and extra stamp duty, which I think most of us are going, you know what, fair dues. These people, you've got a second home, by definition, you've got some spare cash, we'll take some extra money off you. Doesn't impact an ordinary people buying their own home. And then she didn't pay it because she'd used some rinky-dink little... She dodged her tax. She lost her job. It was so unimportant, she lost her job over it. It's still an ongoing investigation which tells you how incompetent our civil services, and she hasn't paid it back, tells us that she has no intention of doing so. I mean, come on.
Because I don't like to moralise about people's tax affairs.
I sodding well do.
And people on the left...
Pay your taxes.
And also people on the left making a bit of money, particularly if, like Angela Rayner, they actually won't from much to begin with. But it's the hypocrisy, and it stinks to high heaven, and it's so obvious to people. So the fact that she still has this hanging over her while she can still mouth all the old platitudes and pieties about a just society, it doesn't sit right.
No, exactly. But we're all going to be millionaires under Labour's new change. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is another call. Normally we've just been talking solidly about Iran right now, so it makes a bit of a change. But this meningitis outbreak in Kent at the university there, basically it's now spread to London. We've got definitely a case in London. We know we've got some 20 cases, including also a 9-month-old little baby. And I was talking on the show yesterday of my daughter when she was 3 having a meningitis scare. She didn't have it, but she had rather blotches and she was definitely unwell. And as we know, actually, the spots that don't, when they put the glass on them. Can I remember now? Are they supposed to change or not change? But the main thing you're just looking out for is just feeling unwell, bad headache and stiff neck. Actually, those are more of the early signs. But a lot of people simply do not have the predictable signs of what meningitis is. So it's now a national incident. It's now emerged. I mean, not only that the UK Health Security Agency, I mean, names... quite clear about what they're supposed to be doing. They were notified. It was France that notified after an exchange student had meningitis. So on the Friday, they notified doctors and said, look, in hospitals, we may have a meningitis outbreak. They don't bother contacting Kent University. They don't contact anybody. They're pretty sure they know where it's from this nightclub in Canterbury. Chemistry. It's got 1,600 people a night turning up there. 3 nights in a row, 5th, 6th and 7th of March, they've had people, they reckon, people who've been infected from being at that nightclub. Not until the Sunday do they notify anyone, including the nightclub, who they notify on social media, on an unverified social media post, like someone just claiming to be Chemistry Nightclub. I mean, seriously, could you not go and knock on the door and speak to somebody and say, do you have details of who's been here? Do you have any information for us? Tickets that are being sold or something like that. They don't notify the university. Universities have got the emails of every single person. You can email everybody, right? You can contact the local schools and get the sixth formers who may have been at the club as well. We know one of those who's died was a local sixth former. I mean, absolute abject failure. And now it's spread nationally.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are incompetent. I'm so surprised. And then they are at the university giving out antibiotics. Now they've all gone. All the university students have left because there's no exams and no social events. They've all gone home. Taking it with them, apparently 2-week incubation period. But they were handing out masks. It's not an airborne disease. It's not an airborne disease. You have to have close personal touching, snogging, sharing a drink, sharing a vape. And they're handing out masks. This is how mad our health service is.
I think the madness of the response was really ran home when you saw those long queues of students at the University of Kent queuing for their vaccine. And,
antibiotics.
For their antibiotics, sorry. And they were, many of them were wearing masks, but also sharing vapes. It's one of those things where you just, clearly the messaging isn't there. Clearly the kind of old-fashioned, what they used to call kind of like shoe leather public health, of knocking round places, of making sure something happens on the ground, not just sending out things via broadcast or via Twitter accounts, actually kind of getting in the room and making sure that whether it's the university or the club, that things are in motion. It's important that we keep these things, that there is a kind of level of calm when you're dealing with public health, but at the same time you can't be complacent, and that seems to have been what has happened.
Yeah, exactly. And this, it's not even complacency; it's just inadequacy, incompetence, slow. I'm going to bet you anything the people involved were working from home. I'm serious. On Friday, they were working from home, and that's why they didn't get anything done. Absolutely clear. Well, the Health Secretary, Wes Street, is going to give regular updates. He said, God, they love all this stuff, don't they? We've got Hancock Mark II, haven't we? But say 11 of the cases linked to this one nightclub, and no one bothered contacting the nightclub officially. Good God. Seriously. If I'd found that out, I would have contacted the nightclub myself. You know what I mean? I would have been able to do that. But as I said to my daughter last night, same rules for you and your dad. Don't go around snogging people. Don't share drinks or fakes. Just really,
you can go back to that in a few weeks.
Usual rules apply then. But let's, But yeah, we need to be careful. But being realistic. And there's a lot of talk about handing out jabs, but it's kids and it'll be 12 plus now, and they have had one of the jabs. But the jab is not going to give you instant protection anyway. This is just about being sensible. But it doesn't mean everything needs to be on hold and we all go into a mad panic.
No,
just look out. Tell people what the symptoms are. Make sure the medics know to check for meningitis and treat as if it's meningitis, if in any doubt.
And also make sure that the people who might have been exposed stay the course. It's very difficult with the student population, let alone when they're all going home almost immediately. It's not obvious that all of that has been clearly communicated, but we shall wait and see. I mean, from what it looks like at the moment, obviously it's horrendous the fact that we've had deaths. It's horrendous the fact that it's spread beyond Kent, and the fact that there's 20 confirmed cases now. But here's hoping that what began very lacklustre will actually kick into gear now, and this can get...
But I hate it when the health authorities and West Street, it was all unprecedented. They've never seen anything like that. That's because we've had jabs and things, and that massively works. But I'm sorry, we've had bigger meningitis outbreaks in the past before we had this. This is everything's unprecedented. Everything it's not. It's not. There's a reason why they developed a jab for the sodding thing. It's because it does actually kill and it does maim. It's just ridiculous. Let's talk about what's been going on with the Iran war. We've had Donald Trump in the Oval Office with Michael Martin, the Irish Taoiseach, yesterday, as always on Paddy's Day, hurling, another insult about he's no Churchill to Starmer, pointing at the bust. He's criticised the BBC for their corrupt and fraudulent Iran coverage. So far, so good, Mr. President. Agree with him on that. Now, even Kemi Badenoch has actually blasted Donald Trump as being childish in terms of his sort of rants at Keir Starmer. There's no doubt at all Donald Trump seems to be much more angry with Keir Starmer for the shilly-shallying indecisive than he is with, Friedrich Merz or other world leaders who've just gone a blank, no, we're not helping. He says, basically, we don't need NATO.
Yeah, no, it has been interesting just how furious the President seems with Keir Starmer, and I think it's kind of telling because this could always have happened, not least because of the politics of the two men respectively, not least because of the fact that the UK has taken on a kind of outsized role in American political debate, particularly on the right, the idea that the left has gone mad over here and is presiding over an absolute dystopia. About half of it is true, but nevertheless it's still become a bigger political issue. And nevertheless, Keir Starmer managed to maintain a kind of finely balanced...
So I think actually quite impressively so.
Yeah,
give him
he did
credit.
the right amount of backside kissing, shall we say, and it kind of seemed to pay off. That's completely gone now. And I think the thing that Keir Starmer lacks is that whereas if you've got an Emmanuel Macron or even to a certain extent a Friedrich Merz, just as a personality, they can sort of act in such a way that Donald Trump respects, the kind of Emmanuel Macron-Trump battle over the handshake. It's the sort of thing that he respects. Keir Starmer is a complete wet lettuce, not just politically speaking, but also as an individual. So I think it's just irreparable at this point, to be perfectly frank. And that's aside from the rights and wrongs of when shouldn't have got involved. We can get into that. But he's just played this so badly. There was a world in which he did almost made exactly the same moves in terms of not getting involved at the top, wanting to make this more cautious approach, etc., and still not come out of it as badly, but it has come out of it
and
very
that's
badly.
the thing. He's not got, again, he's no Tony Blair. He's not got that deftness, that lightness of touch that he can dance around these things. Yesterday had and confirmation came last night that Iran confirmed that their security chief Ali Larijani had been killed. They denied his death earlier. He, very apparently, again, let's not all pretend we knew the names of all the senior officials in the Iranian regime. Very, very significant figure. We had the most fascinating thing, and along with the criticism of the BBC, I think remarkably valid criticism of the BBC over John Simpson, their World Affairs editor, by the way, still a very senior figure. I mean, it's bad enough having to listen to Jeremy Bowen and others, but he actually wrote this yesterday. I've met Ali Larijani several times over the years. Yes, he was a top figure in a nasty regime, but yeah, you see, John, this is where you lost the crowd. But he always seemed clever and reasonable, the kind of person you might want to negotiate a peace deal with. Is it a good idea for Israel to take out people like him? Now, 4 hours later, he deleted the post saying he'd been interpreted wrongly. No, John, it wasn't interpreted wrongly. This is a man who had ordered the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent Iranians simply for marching in the streets. I mean, he genuinely was part of that. He is an evil rapist, endorser, torturer, executor. He's an awful, awful human being. No longer he was. But he always seemed clever and reasonable. And everyone's been mocking him, sort of think about Hitler, good painter, nice with kids. I mean, but, do you know what? Think about Hitler? Never swore. Lovely guy. It was lovely to my mum when he met her. I mean, this is the level we're at. They are... I mean, they've lost their frigging minds at the BBC. Yeah,
I mean, this conflict is only the latest example of that. I think the Iran thing has really demonstrated that there is a certain type of journalist, a certain type of person in politics, a certain type of person in policy who will just reflexively take the other side to a degree.
The anti-American, anti-Israel side.
It's just part of the muscle memory now. And maybe it's just they hate Donald Trump. Maybe it's just that, that clouds everything that they do. And if this was Joe Biden going after the mullahs, they would feel slightly different about it. Maybe they are that basic in their analysis and morals.
Hate Trump, hate Israel, hate American capitalism, West.
Exactly, but nevertheless, I think it's clearly clouded the coverage of this particular conflict as well.
Absolutely.
Where there is as we saw with the Gaza war, a willingness to take what the Iranian regime says at face value because they're such clever and lovely people. Meanwhile, anything that the Americans come out with, and even just that comes out of the American press, is something that's going to be dealt with.
Well, what do you make also? I mean, this top US counter-terrorism official, Joe Kent, who was previously big MAGA guy, he's resigned over the Iran war. Extraordinary resignation letter urging Trump to reverse course, basically saying the Americans have been pushed into this by the Israeli government. I mean, this is a big sort of ongoing meme in social media in the let's face it, the Jew-hating anti-Semitic circles. Let's call them what they are. His own wife was actually killed by a suicide attacker, I think, an Al-Qaeda suicide attacker. He'd previously been very supportive. He's previously spoken openly at Sky about, how, October the 7th only happened because we hadn't dealt firmly enough with Iran, and now he's backtracking on that. By all accounts, though, his current wife, his second wife, massively, massively, massively left-wing, anti-Israel in terms of all her public posts, would suggest that someone has had a big change of view or is under some domestic pressure. Who knows?
And it's one of those things where it's totally legitimate to say that you oppose this war. It's totally legitimate to say that it's not in Americans' interest, if that's your particular perspective.
Or not necessarily. He says Iran did not pose a threat to America right now.
Which is one of those... I mean, it's a question of degrees, isn't it, that? I mean, it's whether or not you feel like the fact that they could, in short order, make a nuclear weapon is the same.
I mean, the fact that they boasted about this in the last negotiating meeting.
Well, exactly. And also, it's also about their ballistic missile capability. Like, are you going to be able to intervene at some later point? So there's all these different questions in the balance. But this specific thing about Israel basically put America up to it, aside from anything else, it's just nonsense. The idea that this tiny country in the Middle East is able to have America over a barrel.
It's the Jews, isn't it? It's the Jews. Everyone. It's the Jew. It's the strong, when they say Israeli lobby in American politics, which has been a very powerful lobby.
Exactly. And it just also doesn't scan with Trump and Netanyahu's relationship as well. There's been various points in which they've fallen out, where he's castigated Benjamin Netanyahu in public, where he's done things like kind of bringing about the ceasefire agreement with Hamas, which was very much about America saying, no, you stop now, this has gone far enough. It doesn't map onto the reality. But this is going to be a big problem for Trump because there's a lot of people within his administration, particularly on the national security foreign policy side. There's a bit of a split, but there are people like Joe Kent, there are people like Tulsi Gabbard, who was formerly a Democrat, is now in the administration, is on record as of a few years ago just for saying very clearly no war with Iran, these people are not a threat to us and so on and so forth.
I mean, they
still imposed. How that's going to play out now, this won't be the last resignation.
I just don't know how anyone could say they don't think Iran's a threat. I mean, that's positively, heads in the sand stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Love to hear your thoughts on the meningitis outbreak. Abject failures, I think, by the authorities on that. But crucially, also Angela Rayner launching a direct challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership. She says Labour is running out of time to change course. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Your call's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:31 is the time. Getting your calls in right now. 0344 499 1000. Angela Rayner's launched a direct challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership. She says that Labour is running out of time to change course. But is she the answer? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch. Let's talk to Stuart, who is on the line in Wigan. Hello, Stuart.
Hiya.
Hello.
I think you probably know what I'm going to say.
I think I probably do, Stuart.
Angela Rayner, seriously, the woman is detestable. I'm working class, and I don't claim her at all. She has nothing to do. She can't even see working class, that witch.
No. I'm not going to have her being called a witch. I don't think she's a witch. I've got to be honest with you. She's a great laugh for a drink. But she doesn't like to see me in public, obviously. But she wouldn't admit to it. But no, but genuinely, I don't think she's a witch. I mean, I don't agree with pretty much any of her politics. but she's not a witch.
Right, well, we'll have difference of opinion there. I mean,
All right, then.
Would she... Radio.
Okay, you're not a fan of Keir Starmer either. Would you rate her as being a better leader than him if she could get it?
No, I wouldn't, because she's further to left, and that's the issue.
Okay, you don't trust her?
Dangerous than anything. But am I wrong in thinking that she's a criminal?
She's not a criminal. No, she's not a criminal. She didn't break. I don't think she didn't break criminal law, but she did not pay her full stamp duty, and she is currently in, I think, in a battle with HMRC about whether or not she needs to pay it back or not.
Well, I think they'd have something to say to me.
I think they probably would, mate. But as we know, these rules seem to be different. Not a fan. Stuart, thank you very much indeed for that. Let's go to Kevin. He's on the line in North Yorkshire. Now, Kevin, you want to talk about this event in Trafalgar Square last night, which Nick Timothy, the Shadow Home Secretary for the Tories, that he has posted about. And this was this sort of mass prayer event and iftar, which is the meal at the end of fast for a huge number of Muslims in Trafalgar Square during Ramadan. What did you make of it?
Well, you mentioned earlier about it, and I was just thinking to myself, it is what it's meant to be, which is deliberately provocative, and it is what the radical aspects of Islam do, which is be assertive and cause, cause people like myself and yourself to discuss it on the radio. Yeah. And then what can the radical left and the Islamists can turn around and say, well, they're all racist.
Yes. Oh, yes, and there's plenty of that on social media. Yeah.
That's exactly what it's designed to do. And it does it. But you can get a woman who stands outside an abortion clinic and silently prays in her head, but because that's perceived to be being assertive and provocative, gets arrested.
Yeah, and again, she wasn't directly outside the abortion clinic either. She wasn't directly outside it.
Exactly, and yet she was perceived to be exactly the same thing, which is provocative and assertive, and was arrested for it. So it is a double standard, but it is done specifically to get people like myself and yourself talking about it on the radio, so that then it can be proven that we are racist. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't work anymore. Again, it makes me uncomfortable. I'm an atheist, so I mean, it doesn't matter which religion it is, but nevertheless, there is the Muslim Brotherhood playbook on this, which this is an extremist radical organisation banned in large parts of the Middle East for a very good reason, as indeed are sort of unplanned sort of prayer events in public. They are also banned. It's part of their playbook is that we will have these big events, sort of imposing this. It's a sort of a flexing of muscles. Now, maybe ordinary Muslims who were at that event, that wasn't what they thought at all. It was just a nice place to go to share this very important, this meal at the end of fasting during Ramadan, and they're not thinking of it like that at all. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people organising the event weren't planning that.
The problem is, Julia, you do that in any other Muslim country as a Christian, as a group of Christians, and it wouldn't happen. Yeah. It wouldn't be allowed to happen. Yeah. So doing it here, because the perfectly nice ones think it's okay to do it, they should actually be aware that they're not in a Muslim country.
No,
yes, we are tolerant of people. You come and have your prayers in your mosque, and you do that. But don't be assertive, don't rub it in people's faces, and don't try and assume after that because we say, hang on a minute, we're not comfortable with this, that we're racist.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, people say, well, what's the difference between, a procession for Easter or something with, a Christian procession? You think, we're a Christian country, it's part of our culture and heritage, it's a different thing. I'm still not quite sure why I'm uncomfortable with it, but I am uncomfortable with it, and I don't think I'm a racist or a bigot or an Islamophobe, but I am uncomfortable with it, and we're going to try and get to the bottom of that with various guests throughout the day. Kevin, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to get Tom Slater's thoughts on that in a few moments as well. We're going to take a quick break right now, then we're going to talk to James Ball, political editor of The New World. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to my next guest, who's James Ball. He's political editor of The New World. A very good morning to you, James.
Good morning.
Let's talk about Angela Rayner. She says Labour's running out of time under Starmer, need to change. She says that changes to migrant rules are un-British and a breach of trust. Not really bothered about the breach of trust to the British people, it would appear. But how direct a challenge is this, and how serious a threat is she to Keir Starmer?
I think it's a pretty direct challenge. I mean, there's no point sort of pretending otherwise, is there? When you come out, when you are the deputy leader of the party, when you're a senior cabinet minister, and you say that several of the flagship policies are wrong and the government's running out of time, you are mounting a challenge, aren't you? Or you're positioning yourself for one. And I think she's trying to remind everyone she's very popular in the party. She can get coverage. She can sort of pull people in because she is she does have this HMRC scandal. She does have issues. I think there's a lot of positioning going on.
Well, that's it. She needs to get the HMRC situation of a stamp duty completely resolved. And again, I mean, it's 6 months. For the love of God, this is a level of incompetence that, frankly, I would utterly expect from the British government. But she cannot stand it. You know, let's say local elections in May, Labour get trounced, as the polls suggest. There's a leadership challenge, a contest. There's no way she can stand for that if she's still under investigation.
Yes, there's actually not so much from her, but a couple of people in her orbit and around her team have got a bit conspiratorial about this and almost started saying it's suspicious. And I have to say, lads, look, HMRC investigations drag on forever. You know, I've covered some of these for high net worth individuals, and they can go on 2-3 years sometimes for no good reason.
This isn't very complicated.
It is ridiculous.
Did she not owe stamp duty on her second home? And the answer is yes, she did. Is the question? The key thing is whether she has to pay a fine, whether she did it was a mistake, or whether it was very deliberate. I mean, I'm pretty sure I know which one it was.
It comes up to how much penalty that you pay, because there's also a layer in between that's basically you should have known, and you weren't quite reckless, you weren't quite malicious, but you were more than just a bit careless. And like determining which of these things, which is whether you pay 10%, 30% or 50% penalty, just takes forever. It's grindingly agonising.
But here's the thing.
I wonder if she could offer to pay the top whack.
If you were Housing Secretary, you brought this rule in and you were advised by your lawyers and your estate agents that you needed, the lawyer dealing with your buying your property, that you needed to get independent legal advice on that issue, and you failed to do so. Unless you've got a lawyer who's the top lawyer in that field who told you don't need to pay it and you took his advice, you banked your rights, pay the penalty, move on.
I agree with you.
But, you know, I don't think Angela follows advice a lot of the time. That's one of the issues. Do you think she's got a chance of winning?
I think she's got quite a strong chance of winning. I'm not sure that would help Labour. She is a better politician than I think she gets credit for. Yeah. She is pretty reviled among the public, and the public have made up their mind. She's not someone people haven't heard of who they might warm to. Her recognition is nearly as good as Keir Starmer's, and it's nearly as bad as Keir Starmer's among the public. But she is very popular in Labour. Labour voters sort of quite like her, Labour members really like her, and Labour backbenchers really quite like her. So there is a danger that she is a bit of a trap for the party. I think, as I say, I think she's less popular than she deserves to be. I think she's got a bit more talent than
I don't think people like people, whether they're a Tory or not, a politician complaining about, hate and division, and then calling, in a public speech, in front of, hundreds of people, calling Tories scum. I mean, she's got form. She's a terrible hypocrite on pretty much everything. I've got a very big issue with the fact that I think Keir Starmer, he's got a lot of pieces of paper from qualifications that suggest that he's a clever man, but he's clearly and utterly, absolutely, this is over his head in terms of the ability to run this country. Angela Rayner, there's a lot of snobby stuff about her. I think her life story is amazing, and I think that what she has done to become an MP, let alone to have been Deputy Prime Minister of this country, is an extraordinary inspiration. It's like the equivalent, like the American dream for British people to have done that from the background that she came from. And I say all credit to her, in totally a non-patronising way, genuinely all credit. You've got to have some grit and some steel in your loins to be able to do what she's done. However, do I think she's bright enough to be the Prime Minister? Hell no.
I think I agree. I think she's a pretty impressive candidate. And I think you've also, it was her job as deputy to be the attack dog. That's always more polarizing and tricky when you move up. I think my question with her is actually her political instincts. Yeah. Because she had 3 different scandals around housing. She had a first one to do with whether she sold something as a first or second home. And look, it was to do with a divorce. Life's a bit messy. I think people understood that. But she'd had a front page scandal over housing. And then she had 2 more while being housing minister. And Keir Starmer's problem is he's got no political instincts. He can't see the massive problems heading his way.
Yeah, it's almost like he's had a problem with someone else who'd had 2 scandals before as well. I can't remember his name now.
No, it doesn't come to mind. But
I can't remember.
But it feels like actually Angela Rayner's quite similar to him in that. And I wonder whether that instinct is the problem. Yeah. But the big problem is the public have made up their mind on her, and the public don't tend to change their minds once it's settled.
No, indeed. Last ask you also, BBC being under attack once again. We've got that case. They've been asking for Donald Trump to throw out his case again on the Panorama, complete misrepresentation of his speech on January the 6th. That case was back in court this week. But he's also yesterday in the Oval Office attacking the BBC for corrupt and fraudulent Iran coverage. Given that we had the likes of John Simpson, the World Affairs editor, basically talking about, what a clever and reasonable guy was this former Iranian security chief who basically ordered the murder, the slaughter in the streets of tens of thousands of young Iranians just fighting for, or peacefully protesting for some basic civil rights and freedoms. It's an extraordinary thing for the BBC World Affairs editor said. He thinks he's been misinterpreted, but Donald Trump's right, isn't he? Their coverage is fraudulent and corrupt.
I mean, I think it's a completely bizarre thing for John Simpson to post. I mean, I'm a huge admirer of John Simpson. I sort of grew up watching his broadcasts. I thought he was phenomenal. I thought that was monumentally stupid as a post. I thought it was pretty contemptible as well, to be honest. But I think there's sometimes this foreign correspondent tendency to go, well, look at all these people I've met and I understand all the perspectives and I bring you this. And I think he just shot into that pompous instinct and misfired. But he is mostly retired. I think he still presents a little niche show. He is not their current...
still paying his wages.
I think he does a little bit of show here and there.
He's the World Affairs editor.
I didn't think he still was. I thought he moved on from that several years ago. So forgive me if I'm wrong on that.
But forgive me if I'm wrong. Can someone quickly check?
I think this is largely an ex-BBC person who is maybe going a little bit funny in his retirement rather than the output of the Beeb itself.
It's kind of where Jeremy Bowen and others have been as well. Let me also ask you about a story back here at home. It's 2 interesting things here. One is the new poll by Policy Exchange think tank. They found that British Muslims are 5 times more likely to have a positive view of the Iranian regime than the general public. Also far more hostile to the US and to Israel. Almost 2 in 5 Muslims, almost 40% of Muslims in the UK have a favourable view of not of Iran, of the Iranian regime, which is quite extraordinary compared to just 8% of the wider public. I mean, in plus 22 net favourability rating towards the hardline dictatorship in Tehran. Now, I'm sorry, this is a poll that's been done after the crackdown and tens of thousands of people slaughtered on the streets. We have a problem with the fact that we have a large group of people, there's some 4+ million Muslims in this country, who largely, well, certainly a huge minority of them, do not share the same general views on pretty much anything, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's Jews, whether it's homosexuality, women's rights, you name it, do not share the same views as the rest of the general public. How big a concern, if at all, should that be?
I think it is a source for concern. Look, I think if we want to say that multiculturalism works, if we want... I don't want to say that. I'm sure lots of people don't want to say that, but I'm one of the people who do. If we want to say it works... Don't you think British culture is superior? We do need some sort of... Well, I think British culture is that sort of thing. In my lifetime, it has actually been... Well, I think it has been diversity and having all sorts of things.
British culture isn't diversity. British culture is British culture. By definition, it's not... It's not Benetton. British culture is British culture.
We're a country where the national dish is tikka masala, and I quite like that.
But again, a dish invented by the British.
I mean, yes.
It's invented by the British. It uses spices from... I mean, mate, we didn't invent the potato either. We eat a lot of potato, eat a lot of chips.
Look, exactly. Things are better when things come in and mix from around the world. That's good.
That's not multiculturalism.
But look, to sort of get to this, I think for that to work, we do have to have sort of shared tolerance and shared values. And I think there are things going on that mean those diverge. I think there can be reasons for that. I think people look very closely at Gaza. People look at what they see as establishment indifference to Muslim deaths in Gaza, and they look
What? Are you kidding me? We're talking about nothing else.
They look for places that sort of champion it up. I don't think 39% of Muslims are cheering on a
But that's
theocracy.
what this poll suggests. That's exactly what this poll suggests.
I think a poll answer covers a lot of options, and that figure worries me, but I
don't think it's a difficult question. Do you have a favourable or a non-favourable view of the Iranian regime just after it's been on the front page of every paper and every media broadcaster for slaughtering innocent people? I mean, I think that's a really easy answer.
I mean, I think it should be easy. It's an absolutely deplorable regime. Yeah, I said I agree it's a problem.
But that's not multicultural. Why should we be tolerant of that culture? I'm not tolerant of that culture.
No, that wasn't what I was saying. I was saying
you're saying multiculturalism is about us being tolerant and diversity. I don't want people who have those views in my country.
No, Julia, I was saying multiculturalism has to cut both ways.
No, it doesn't. No.
Well,
I don't believe in multiculturalism because I believe that Western liberal culture is superior to every other culture that's ever existed and anywhere around the world. That's why we are not moving en masse to Pakistan or Iran, and people from those countries are moving en masse here. There's a clue.
Well, we are moving en masse to Dubai, allegedly, and that's
because that's 80% That's an 80% foreign population there. That's why. They think, quite wrongly in my view, that they are living basically a Western life with sunshine.
Yes, I mean, you're absolutely not living a Western life there in any stretch of the imagination. But apparently, the people who move there keep insisting it has better values. And trust me, they are a lot more closely aligned to Sharia than anything you're going to find anywhere in London.
Couldn't agree with you more on that. Well, we're going to end on a note of agreement. There's lots more I want to talk about. Time is out. James Bull, political editor of The New World. Thank you very much indeed. 10:50 is the time. Very quick response from Tom Slater.
I think it's an indication of how our debate is getting a bit mixed up. It's not about food. It's not about these things that everyone can kind of agree on. And it's also, you can't have a culture of its prime virtue is that there's lots of different influences in it. I think that's something.
You either have a culture or you don't.
Yeah.
Indeed, we'd like to keep ours. Thanks ever so. Coming up next, we're going to talk about that vote in the Scottish Parliament last night, which basically went against a move to bring in assisted suicide. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:53 is the time. Let's get straight to my next guest, and he is Dr. Gordon MacDonald. He's the Chief Executive of Care Not Killing, a UK-based alliance of organisations calling for better palliative care as opposed to euthanasia and assisted suicide. Good morning to you, Gordon.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us. Well, obviously, last night we had that vote in the Scottish Parliament, which was, many had said was going to be too close to call. In the end, not too close to call at all. A clear vote, 69 to 57, to throw out a bill to allow assisted dying for terminally ill adults. One abstention as well. Many, it seems, who had previously supported the move for assisted dying, then voting against it, given a free vote, as they've had in the House of Commons as well. Why do you think that vote fell when so many thought that was going to go through this time?
I think there were 3 points, basically. The first point was that lots of the MSPs were worried about coercion, and they didn't feel that it was possible to protect against coercion. And as said by a number of them last night, even one case of coercion is one too many. And I think that concern also applies to the Westminster legislation, to be honest. It wasn't just an issue to do with this particular bill. The second issue was that there were powers that had been included in or clauses that had been included in the bill which were actually related to Westminster powers, and so they had to be taken out, particularly in relation to conscience protection for doctors and training. And again, that I think highlighted the fact that the bill had been badly drafted in that sense, or unwisely drafted perhaps.
Rather similar to the Westminster bill, which is also facing difficulties,
And then I think the third thing was that just when people got to the end of the precipice, they just sort of backed off, because although lots of people agree in principle, when they think about it in more detail, they change their minds. And I think we saw that with the MSPs as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and particularly the final point. I'm somebody who's long believed we should have assisted suicide for people, not just terminally ill, but people who find their quality of life through disease or disability just unacceptable to them, a life they believe to be not worth living. I consider that to be a fundamental human freedom. But I've been massively opposed to all of these different bills because they don't seem to have the same checks in. So I'm principally in favour and practically against what they've come up with so far. Do you think, though, that inevitably it will happen? We, for many, many years, have had a parliament in Westminster, and I imagine also the same in Scotland, that's actually out of touch with the public view. The public seem to be in favour of bringing in these laws without looking at all the detail that these MSPs have, and MPs and Lords in the Houses of Parliament have done in Westminster, that actually this is inevitable. It's happened in American states, it's happened in other European countries and elsewhere, and it's inevitably going to happen here?
I don't think so. Actually, the public just don't want people to suffer. That's the reality of public opinion polls. When you present the arguments against, the public often change their mind, and the support drops dramatically, just to 19% in the Scottish context last year in the poll we did.
When you give a specific example.
Yeah, and when you give them the examples of what has happened overseas, particularly people are worried about children, it being extended to children. That is a big one. People feeling that's right.
And we've even had cases, haven't we? 18, 19-year-olds, teenagers in Holland, where who are anorexic and being allowed to die, and there's a big issue, isn't there? People who feel they're a burden on their families. Financially don't have a family, and financially just don't have the support they need to have a decent quality of life, and choosing, in inverted commas, death. And the GPs, even under Westminster law, being considered, being able to almost encourage them, offer this as an option to them, whereas people who perhaps have got money and quality of life and a good family would not choose that. And you're then looking at basically, let's kill off the poor and the lonely and the unhappy rather than anyone else, which again makes people very uncomfortable for quite good reasons.
Yeah, and I think there's another aspect too. I mean, you're absolutely right there, but the other aspect is that lots of people who are elderly feel that they are a burden, a financial burden on their family just because of the costs of care.
Yeah.
And they want, understandably, they want to pass on their wealth to their children or their grandchildren, and they feel that they should do the decent thing, which is, of course, not the decent thing in a civilized society. But, I think that's an internalized pressure that people feel sometimes, and it's impossible to protect against that, really. And even if the family themselves would be horrified that that might be what their relative is thinking, nevertheless, people may feel that pressure.
But what about the people, again, this is something I've discussed with my family, discussed with my husband and my child. I've got a relative in a care home, and I look at some of the people in that care home and I just think, that's not a life. I can't imagine a point when I would think that was a life that was worth living for me, and I would want that choice, and I may choose not to take it, but I'd want that choice to be able to opt out of it.
Yeah, but I think you want that choice now, when you're fully functioning. But actually, a lot of people who've got dementia are very happy, but it's very difficult for the family. And I think that's what often drives this, is that it's the emotional distress that other members of the family have seeing their relative.
Yeah. Dr. Gordon at McDonald, sorry we didn't have a bit longer. No, I'm sure this is going to be a debate that keeps on going. Chief Executive Officer of Care Not Killing. I'm going to bring Tom Slater in on that in the next half hour. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that vote as well. 0344 499 1000 vote in Scotland, of course, still being debated in England. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or you connect with us, thank you so much for your company. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've missed anything from the show already, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to be talking more about Angela Rayner saying that Labour is running out of time under Keir Starmer. I'll also be chatting to a former British diplomat who says that Islamist ideology is rife within the civil service. I mean, not shocked. And the meningitis outbreak in Kent is now being treated as a national instance. Some clear failings there and delays at the UK Health Security Agency. All that coming up. Particularly want to hear from you about Angela Rayner. As you know, you can talk to us about Iran, the meningitis outbreak. Indeed, that conversation we just had about assisted dying and that vote that failed in Scotland yesterday. But particularly I want to hear from your thoughts on Angela Rayner. She's launched a direct challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership. She says that Labour is running out of time to change course. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is our number to call. You can text the word talk and message us on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Is she the answer to Labour's woes? Oh, I don't know if the answer to that is Angela Rayner, but there we are. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Lots of texts and tweets coming in as well. Tom Slater, I'm delighted to say, is still joining me throughout the whole show. He's editor of Spiked Online. Morning once again to you. I'm going to give you a chance to come back in that conversation we just had about the assisted dying bill. There's been a bill going through Parliament in Westminster all this time. It's basically being talked out, filibustered out by the peers in the House of Lords. And I say thank God for that. A private member's bill that has not been properly looked at, that got agreement from Parliament, and when there were lots of safeguards, those safeguards are all stripped away. I think the committee debate on it has been, I would say, shocking and undemocratic. And as someone who is philosophically absolutely in favour of assisted dying, assisted suicide, I am horrified by that bill. I'm very, very wary that it's not quite the same bill of that bill that was being voted on in Scotland, the assisted dying bill there. Not a narrow vote in the end. Scotland rejected it 69 to 57. And it's interesting talking to our guest we just spoke to from an anti-suicide assisted suicide organisation, talking about fears of coercion, various practicalities in terms of protecting conscientious objectors, doctors who wouldn't take part of it, but also people like me who are in favour of in principle but don't think that in practice there are enough safeguards and that it will actually work in the way that we in theory would like it to work. Where do you stand on that?
No, I'm implacably opposed to assisted suicide.
See, that surprises me.
Assisted dying. I think there's a couple of reasons for this. One of which is pretty practical, which is that if you look at anywhere that this has been tried, the supposed safeguards melt away very quickly, and the supposedly very tight bounds which are put around when you can invoke this supposed right suddenly spread. And the slippery slope. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. I mean, Canada is a particularly egregious example where they begin by legalising it for people who are very much at the end of life, but at the same suddenly they're now in the process of, although they keep delaying it, extending it to people with mental health problems. So it's one
so
of
if
those
you've got depression, you can get this.
And it's created a situation where you have people who say have a chronic back injury and then can use the suffering from that to potentially invoke a assisted suicide. Right? It's one of those things where it creates all of these sort of moral horror stories, and I don't think any example has really been created where any of those are ameliorated. That's number one. Yep. The other thing is that it's how it kind of changes our relationship to suicide more broadly, and the sense in which that this is, in some respects, a state-sanctioned response to life suffering. There are all kinds of rights that we enjoy, but this is slightly different as far as the state, doctors, the medical establishment have to assist you in doing so. And I think it sets a really dangerous precedent in our minds and in society, which is the point at which you're maybe not as physically capable as you were previously or mentally capable as you were previously, that your life is somehow not worth living as much. There's a reason that disabled charities are first at the forefront of pushing back against legalisation, because of the way in which it suggests that it almost creates two categories of suicide. Those that as a society we do everything to stop, the proverbial man standing on the bridge, and those which we say, you know what, let me help you with that. There's two different kinds of citizens.
That's the really difficulty. Troubling. That's where we get into difficult territory, don't we? And again, who decides what's worth living? And again, for me, I mean, one of the arguments, and this has been used again and again in criticisms of what's happening in Canada and some of the US states, was actually it's the lack of palliative care, it's the lack of affordable health care, the lack of support, people who are isolated or people whose families are not supportive, and you basically got lonely poor people committing suicide and being encouraged to do so by their doctors. That's it. I don't believe in the sanctity of life. I'm not religious. I don't I support abortion up to well, again, there's going to be a vote in Parliament today, actually, about trying to, in the Lords, trying to overturn an extraordinarily, and I would say immoral, insane law in Commons, to a bill to allow abortion all the way up to birth, and to have that not being criminalised, so that women are not even if the day after the day your baby's born, if you kill your baby, you will be prosecuted for murder. If you do it the day before your baby comes out of your womb, that's absolutely fine. I mean, that can't be right. That can't be right. But I also understand, why people would take a clear moral view, or often religious based, against abortion, full stop. It's a perfectly legitimate philosophical moral viewpoint, and against assisted suicide or suicide. Most religions regard not all, certain religions we may talk about a lot in the news don't have an issue with it, but most religions regard suicide as a terrible, terrible sin.
And even if you're someone like myself who's not religious, I think that's part of that sort of Christian or religious inheritance that we've kept, I think, is positive, which is to see human life.
Life has value.
Life has tremendous value, and even if that's just sort of socially defined or however we want to think about it, so much of civilised society, of law, is to mitigate against the degradation of human life, against the ending of human life. This is something that we carry with us even as we enter a more sort of secular age. I think that's a positive thing. And I think that the thing about the assisted suicide discussion is that it does sort of treat human life as sort of secondary, as something which can be subject to other considerations, and also something which there is going to be a tremendous amount of coercion. We've talked about the kind of safeguards in terms of who becomes able to access this supposed right, but also the horror stories you see everywhere this is legalised is someone who is effectively feeling like they're a burden. As we all know, if we've got elderly relatives, that feeling can often far outstrip the supposed burden they're actually inflicting on their families. You don't feel...
Oh, I don't know.
If you want to name names,
I got the elderlies.
But and it can create this really unfortunate incentive towards saying, you know what, I will go down this pathway when otherwise it wasn't there. And also, if we're having this conversation in a situation where end-of-life care was perfectly well-funded, which hospice care was perfectly well-funded, in which palliative care was the world leader, maybe we can have this discussion. But let's sort that out.
That's a fair point. Let's turn and talk about something completely different, other end of life, because meningitis, we know, affects people younger. We know young children. We know those are the sort of sixth form and university age. And we've seen this meningitis outbreak in Kent, at University of Kent, around this nightclub, chemistry nightclub, over a few nights earlier in March. The case has now spread to London. We've had one that went abroad, went to France. That's how actually our UK Health Security Agency apparently first became aware of a cluster of cases. This is now being treated as a national incident. We've got 20 cases. One includes a baby girl, 9-month-old. I said, having had a child with a meningitis scare who thankfully didn't have it. It's absolutely terrifying. This is a killer disease. Difference between meningitis, by the way, and COVID is meningitis is actually a threat to young people. Like measles is a threat to young people. COVID, unless there are underlying health issues, really very much not so at all. And yet we had this bizarre situation. We had all these students in Kent queuing up, and they've apparently all gone home now. The campus is dead now, and all queuing up to get their antibiotics, precautionary antibiotics, if they'd been to this nightclub, been around people who had been found positive with meningitis, and being put in masks. It's not even an airborne disease. I mean, it's genuinely scary how useless our health officials are, and the nonsense about this stuff. But UK Health Security Agency, they found out on Friday, notified doctors, didn't notify the public or the students involved or the nightclub until the Sunday. 2 days, again, Saturday night, Friday night and Saturday night might have been good nights to notify students about don't snog people, don't share vapes, don't share drinks, might have been a good idea. Not sure they'd have listened to it, to be fair, but and when they did contact the nightclub, 1,600 people a night over 3 nights who could have been closely next to somebody, very close to somebody who had meningitis. They did it by an unofficial, social media handle. I mean, this is absolute Keystone Cop stuff.
No, I completely agree, and sort of a piece with the public health response we saw a few years ago that lest we want to
what was that
invoke
about?
it. It's that sort of strange way in which the public health establishment seems to sort of underreact and then overreact a lot of times. So we've gone from a pretty lackadaisical, pretty cat-candid response in the early period of this to now just
daily updates.
Daily updates. You know, they'll get the death ticker on the BBC in a few days, I'm sure. It's this is not helpful. What you need is sort of quite sure-footed, almost surgical responses to outbreaks like this.
Swift.
Where you get in
full
there,
information.
You go to the places affected, you ensure that the right advice is put forward and that the people who need antibiotics or whatever of treatment get it, and that you deal with this in a quite front-footed fashion. That's not what we've ended up with here, and I would be lying if I said that surprised me. We shouldn't be, we shouldn't be panicked about this.
I'm telling you,
it's a deadly infection, but we shouldn't be panicked about it.
They found out on Friday.
Still.
I want to do freedom of information. How many of the staff were working from home on the Friday? Well, they were at some away day, or they were all at some sort of lanyard, DEI training or something. Seriously, people in our public sector,
non-binary roller skating awareness week.
No, exactly. They are not doing their jobs properly for a reason. I'm telling you this. Let's talk about Angela Rayner, talking about people doing their jobs properly. She says that Labour is running out of time under Starmer. She's given a speech. I mean, it's not even pretend it's thinly veiled, not thinly veiled. This is clearly, hello, I'd like to be the next leader. She's not even deputy leader or deputy prime minister anymore for a reason, because she was housing secretary and brought in a rule about paying stamp duty on your second home at a higher rate, but then bought a home on it was her second home and decided not to pay the full stamp duty. Banged to rights, exposed, out of office, but still an MP, still wants to run for the leadership. She says the party's come to resemble the establishment since taking power. Sweetheart, Labour have been the establishment since 1997. But she also says the migration reforms, these outrageous reforms where somebody who comes to this country is going to have to wait 10 years before they get the right to stay here permanently. Oh, how terrible. Apparently that's un-British and a breach of trust because it backdates to people who've already arrived here in the Boris way. I mean, no worry about the breach of trust of the British people who never voted for mass immigration, by the way, and certainly didn't vote for it under Boris Sodding Johnson. So much to answer for. But she's been gone for 6 months, not quiet. Earned 100 grand on the lecture circuit. I mean, if you've been PM, you basically get 100 grand per speech. She's a possible would-be PM, also a socialist, interestingly. Also a socialist, I think, who's opposed to people having second jobs when they're MPs, but also, for some reason, able to go do these speeches while she's busy being a backbench MP. Do you think she's right? Is Labour running out of time? And is she the answer to Labour's woes?
Yes and no. I think it's quite clear that this Labour Party have proven in spectacular and swift fashion that they have no right to govern. Whether or not they'll limp on is another question. I think it really I don't see how they're going to be ousted. I think they'll certainly get to the next election. It's not in their incentives to go early. But one thing that I think is slightly sort of undervalued is the prospect that at the end of another election, as unpopular as this government is, they managed to cobble together some sort of horrific Frankenstein government and sort of coalesce around an anti-reform sort of position. So
the basic Greens, Lib Dems, your party. Yeah. I mean, the rowing. People's Front of Judea People's Front. It won't have anything on this.
Exactly. It will make us nostalgic for the Keir Starmer majority Labour government days if that ever happens. But it's a possibility.
Imagine that.
It is a possibility. Is Angela Rayner the answer? Of course not. In the same way that Keir Starmer's not the answer, and in the same way that Ed Miliband isn't the answer.
Who is?
There is an unfortunate kind of singling out of Angela Rayner and a tendency to treat her as uniquely lightweight, which I think largely comes from the fact that she is from not just a working class background, quite impoverished background, and doesn't speak in the way that the people in Whitehall do and doesn't express herself in that way. But that's not to say that she's not.
She's ginger-haired, she's garish. The rest of them are just boring men in suits that we can't remember the names of. Everyone recognises her.
It's true that she's insubstantial, incredibly shallow political thinker, someone who, to be honest, wasn't fit to be deputy prime minister, let alone prime minister. But that is true of the entire Labour front bench. That is true of much of the House of Commons.
They are incredibly low
and
calibre.
It's only really because of her accent and the manner that people tend to single her out. But even the ones who have had immaculate Oxbridge educations are idiots, and they are trying to impose their idiotic schemes on the rest of us. So she's not the answer.
Hi, Ed Miliband. We're talking about you again.
Even the public school boys in a party and the Oxbridge graduates in a party are not the answer either.
No, indeed. Who is the answer then?
For Labour?
Well, for the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, I think what's happening now is people are striking around for alternatives, but they're not entirely confident in those alternatives. I think, so people are flocking over to the Green Party on the left, but I think people at some point will realise that you cannot vote for this sort of clown car, really. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. On the right of British politics, you obviously have Reform, where there's people are turning towards them, if you look at the focus groups, out of a sense of give them a go, but they're still waiting for more of a plan, more of a sense of what they're going to do in government. So things are really in the balance. But it's clear that this Labour Party, at least certainly its current iteration, has shown that the idea that it has a sort of natural right to govern us, as it had sort of developed in the post-Blair years, that it was just in exile, these horrible Tories are messing it up, we'll get back in there and show them what good governance looks like.
That well.
That's done now, and it will be hopefully for
competence,
a generation.
integrity out the window. Let's talk about Iran war. It's interesting actually not to be leading on the Iran war for a little bit. Donald Trump, more insults in the Oval Office yesterday to Starmer again, saying he's not Churchill. He's talking about how we don't need NATO. I mean, I would say he's quite right that the US doesn't need NATO. Actually, I'm pretty sure that they produce. They're responsible for 50% plus of the spending and the military hardware of NATO. I mean, more than 50% of the military hardware, I think. In which case, why would they need us? He's attacked the BBC. He's corrupt and fraudulent. I agree with him on that. Even Badenoch has started defending. Gary Badenoch has been defending Keir Starmer over Donald Trump's criticism of him. But, I mean, there's still a lot of criticism of Donald Trump and that war in America. We know the polls here. People are largely going, well, we don't think that Keir Starmer made his decision about not helping and not getting involved based on a principle or national interest or decisiveness. He just wobbled and somehow accidentally came out in roughly the right place. But he's getting a particular beating from Trump in a way that Merz and Macron and others are not getting. We've lost this top US counter-terrorism official, Joe Kent. He's resigned over the Iran war. He says that he wants Trump to reverse course. He says that Iran is not an imminent danger. I mean, lots of pressure on Donald Trump. But is this a big Western... basically, a lefty Western. Let's say our entire culture is now left-wing. I mean, in terms of the thinking, it goes on in the civil service, in the media, and in politics. But a very Western sort of liberal view of war, which is war is bad. It's always bad, and unless everything goes perfectly and no one dies, it's a terrible thing. And a lot of clutching of pearls. Whereas actually, Iran is a threat not just to its own people, but to Israel, to the rest of the Middle East. But we can see that playing out right now, and was growing to be a threat in terms of its nuclear threat. It was taking the mick in the negotiations. It needed to be dealt with. They haven't dealt with it perhaps as efficiently and as preparedly as they should have. But actually, this is a necessary war, and we should be on side with it.
It's a tricky one, because I think you're absolutely right that a lot of the aversion to this war, particularly from this Labour Party, much of the British media establishment, is because of a combination of sort of pacifism, pearl clutching, that sense that the kind of maybe a sort of level of overcorrection from Iraq, where you apply that template to every single situation. So whereas you're looking at, say, Saddam Hussein, who's someone who, again, the claims that were being made about weapons of mass destruction, potential threat, therefore, not just to the region but to the world, turned out to be bogus. Where if you're talking about Iran, a headlong move towards developing weapons of mass destruction, and also an ideology internally, not a tin pot dictator trying to cling on to one country, but exporting terrorism, wanting to bring about a conflict with the West. But this is a theocratic cult running a country of nuclear ambitions. This is an order of magnitude bigger threat than any of the other conflicts that we might talk about. That's not to say that people shouldn't be and can't be sceptical about whether or not this is going to be successful. I think one of the things that's happened in the past couple of days is America has actually started to look kind of weak in some respects, because there are limits to American power, as mighty as it is. And when you've got Donald Trump running around trying to ask very under-resourced Western European countries for help with minesweepers and whatever, does that send the right message?
Yeah, but also you can't say we've won and it's all, we don't need your help. Oh, now we need your help.
Yeah.
That looks a bit weird.
It doesn't really add up. And, one could agree that the Mullahs have to be dealt with, that this is a genuine threat, and have deep concerns that this isn't going to be the way in which that threat is dealt with. Problem is, people are just averse to conflict at all. I mean, there's, war is hell, but at the same time, sometimes there's something worse than that, which is not going to war, not dealing with a threat when it's there. So I think that's why we're in a real muddle with this, is that you've got a political establishment, particularly on the left, who came of age in the wake of Iraq.
Yeah.
And there's good things about that. They're kind of doing away with this ideology of just Western liberal interventionism. But sometimes...
Oh, you see, I'm a big fan of that.
But at the same time, it's bred a kind of lack of seriousness about having to act geopolitically at all. Like, you don't have to really think about it. I mean, again, you just hide behind international law.
If you get people like Ed Davies saying, look, we need. I mean, it's just madness. We just need everyone to get around the table, we to talk, and we need to stop the Iranians from firing missiles. Like, sorry, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I don't think you can negotiate with lunatics. I'm just old-fashioned like that. I don't think you can negotiate with lunatics. They tried negotiating for years. They took the mick. They're slaughtering their own people. They would slaughter the whole of Israel, the whole of Britain, and the whole of America if they had the chance. And quite happily would slaughter people in the rest of the Middle East as well. I don't know if it was planned for properly. I don't know if it was they thought through every option about. They surely must have thought about the Strait of Hormuz being closed off. I mean, if they didn't, frankly, that is embarrassing, for want of a better word. But I just think that people just don't understand the geopolitical threats we're under. But that's because everyone seems to think that the post-war norm, the years that we've had, is the norm in human society, and it's not. Mm-hmm. It just isn't. I want to talk about something closer to home. And this is a post by Nick Timothy, who's the shadow Home Secretary for the Tories, and he wrote a post on social media, and it will show some of the footage for those of you who are watching on YouTube, about this. Basically, it was a mass prayer event in Trafalgar Square yesterday, led actually by, taken part in by Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, and the footage we've got is just it's only of men. I couldn't see any women in the rest of the crowd. I don't know whether someone told me they were all at the back. I didn't see them in the footage, but this is a mass prayer event. This is ahead of Iftar, which is an evening meal you have to celebrate the end of feasting of fasting throughout Ramadan. But mass prayer, call to prayer in Trafalgar Square, one of our most famous squares in the country and in London. And this is what Nick Timothy, Conservative MP, wrote. Too many are too polite to say this, he wrote, but mass ritual prayer in public places is an act of domination. The Adhan, which declares that no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, is, when called in a public place, a declaration of domination. Perform these rituals in mosques if you wish, but they are not welcome in our public places and shared institutions. And given their explicit repudiation of Christianity, they certainly do not belong in our churches and cathedrals. And we've seen that taking place. Again, I thought that is utterly bizarre in recent years. Nick Timothy goes on. I'm not suggesting everybody at Trafalgar Square last night is an Islamist, but the domination of public places is straight from the Islamist playbook. Trafalgar Square belongs to all of us. It is a national memorial to our independence and our salvation. Last night was not like a televised football match or a St Patrick's Day celebration. It was an act of domination and therefore division. It shouldn't happen again. Usual suspects accusing him of being Islamophobic, of being bigoted, of being racist, and saying you have celebrations to mark Diwali, to mark many other different religious festivals, and what is the difference and why does he have an issue with Muslims? Do you agree with him or not?
Well, I think he raises some very important points, which is that whilst one can recognise that the whole crowd there are not going to be doing this as necessarily as anything other than a religious ritual that they wanted to engage in public, but it is out of that sort of Muslim Brotherhood playbook, the attempt to use this as not just a sort of proselytising exercise, but one to express a sense of...
a flexing of muscles.
Yeah, a flexing of muscles and a sense of domination, that's entirely clear. And the fact that this has been happening in, as you say, kind of cathedrals and so on, I think speaks to a real deep rot at the heart of even our sort of religious institutions.
Oh, I mean, our religious institutions are completely buggered.
Yeah,
I mean, they're lost causes.
And I'm not even I'm not even a religious man at all, and I'm bemused by what it is that's been going on there. And it should be entirely legitimate to criticise these things. There's obviously the extra question about whether or not it should be allowed, how those rules are formulated. Whatever rules you have would have to be kind of across the board.
Well, that's it. It can't be a rule just against one particular religion,
No, of course, but this is a conversation that we do need to have, not least because of the fact that one thing is whilst I do think that in a free society you have to have consistent rules, that's what it's all about, you don't have exceptions for this perspective, this religion, this whatever, that's quite clear. We also need to recognise not all religions are the same, not all of them have the same ideology. If you talk about Sikhism or Hinduism, it's not proselytising in the same way. Also don't have the extremism problem that the Muslim faith.
Well, that's the thing. It's that people are allowed to say, I've got an issue with one particular religion because of the links with that religion. And again, when people there was a time when people were talking about, Islamist extremist bombing, and how this had nothing to do with the religion of Islam. Well, that mean you're quite wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you're quite wrong, doesn't? But I mean, you've got the Andal Diwali. I've never known Diwali in the square. You've got Hanukkah menorah lighting. That happens yearly, and the mayor attends that. With the Christmas tree lighting again. That's part of a pagan festival related to Christmas. We have lots of events. Most of those events, they are not explicitly. They're not worshipping, they are more a celebration event. But again, the particular issue of this is that when you take the Muslim Brotherhood playbook, Muslim Brotherhood being an extremist Islamist organisation, basically wanting to spread Islam across the world by force if necessary, but they're very explicit. I mean, the documents are very clear, and one of the methods is, again, you go into countries, you then as a minority, you then basically preach, we're a minority, we're persecuted, you gain more rights, you then use that to then gain more rights, to then gain dominance, to then call for Sharia, or to then this is a playbook, and this is why they are banned in many Muslim countries. Because because of the extreme Islamism, and yet they're kind of welcomed and accepted and legal here. Yeah,
no, exactly, and that's one of the things that I think the British state is going to be confronted with, is why we've been so much more complacent about these threats, even than many Muslim majority countries who have recognised what a poison this is, and who are in the process of suggesting that their students and young people shouldn't come here for fear of being radicalised in our own universities.
Bit of a giveaway,
but we can't shy away from these discussions. Like, whatever conclusions we draw, whatever policy prescriptions might come down the line, the fact that we got into a situation where, in a nominally liberal, enlightened, free speech country, criticising religion, or even just one religion in particular, has been deemed heretical, blasphemous, and it's not even the established one, is a mess. And we need to get
that should be a big neon sign that something's going wrong. 11:29 is the time. We're going to get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Let's get to some of your messages coming in about Angela Rayner, and then we've got a call about Islam. Angela Rayner's looked at his direct challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership. Andrew says, Prime Minister Rayner, what has the country become? There's a lot of exclamation marks. Tom says, my reaction is that she'll probably lose her seat in the next election, and good riddance. Yeah, indeed, her seat is it Ashton Underline? I think she's, questionable whether she's going to keep that seat. Celia says, at least there'll be laughs. Starmer gone and Rayner as PM. Prepare for hilarity. It would be more fun It would be more lively, and it can't be much worse, surely. Robin says Labour will not change course. Their goal is to destroy the UK. Rob says Keir Starmer is a disaster, but anyone who thinks in the current world climate that Angela Rayner running the country is a good idea needs to give their heads a serious wobble. I would love to see Angela Rayner in the Oval Office with Donald Trump. Charlie says an intelligent person would have bided her time, but we can't expect that of Angela Rayner. And she underpaid tax. The inquiry is ongoing, says Dan. Next. Not a fan. Let's go to Karen, who's on the line in North Wales. Karen, you want to talk to us about the conversation we just had about Islam. What do you want to say?
I do. I don't want to come across as sort of some form of apologist. I'm speaking to somebody who is a practicing Christian but who's lived many years in the Middle East.
Yeah.
If you were to take a Gulf Arab and take him to London yesterday and he saw that mass iftar, I guarantee you his reaction would be, got over 600 mosques over Greater London of various sizes. What on earth are you doing praying on a dirty floor?
Yeah, that's a fair point, isn't it?
Some of the other things that have been going on, the whole issue of, oh no, we need to create areas where dogs can't go. When I left Qatar, I was gifted 2 dogs by one of the members of the Al Thani royal family as a sign of respect and friendship. The Bedouins sleep in sleeping bags with them to keep warm. It's an absolute myth. Moffat Ali, when the
Green Party deputy leader,
when he won his by-election, sticking his hand above his head in a fist, screaming Allahu Akbar. I lived there for in the Middle East for almost 10 years. I heard the words Allahu Akbar every day, 5 times a day, because it is the first words of the call to prayer.
Yeah.
Never once in that time did I ever hear somebody in a street with their fists raised screaming Allahu Akbar. And I guarantee you, if somebody did that and there were a policeman nearby, he would go across and find out what the problem was.
That's very interesting. That is very interesting. I mean, we know most Gulf states, they're not very tolerant of any dissent of any sort whatsoever. That's why I choose not to live in countries like that. Dissent is kind of what I do. But they kind of got the measure of that particular aspect of extremist Islam.
Absolutely, and they think that we're crazy. I mean, a couple of other things is, this whole business with Kirklees Council. Children should be, made aware that it could be culturally sensitive to draw. Well,
this is advice to schools about drawing images and whether or not that would offend some, or even classes where there are boys and girls dancing and things like that. And we should be.
That will come as a great shock to the branch of La Louvre that's in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
The music. No music. That will come as a great shock to the Qatari Philharmonic Orchestra.
Yeah. This is only extremist Islam, sort of Afghanistan, Muslim Brotherhood style. I mean, that's the thing. Really good to talk to you, Karen. Great knowledge. Thank you very much indeed. Going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking to a former British diplomat who says that Islamist ideology is rife within the civil service. That's up next. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:37 is the time. This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's turn right now to, we're talking quite a lot about stories related to Islamist influence. We certainly are seeing it, are we not, in our British media in terms of BBC coverage, what happened on October the 7th, the war in Gaza, and I would say also in terms of the coverage of the Iran war as well. We're seeing that conversation we just had and criticism from the Shadow Home Secretary Nick Timothy over the Shadow Justice Secretary. I do apologise, I've misnamed him each time. Over this mass prayer event in Trafalgar Square yesterday. And we're also now told it's within the civil service. Who's saying this? Well, it's a former UK ambassador. He says it's undeniable that Islamist entryism is creating anti-Israel sentiment within the civil service. He is a former British diplomat of more than 30 years, Edmund Fitton Brown. I'm delighted to say he joins us right now. A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. What do you mean by Islamist entryism, and how is that impacting our, well, I suppose particularly, crucially, our foreign policy?
Well, it's a term that reflects the approach of the strategy of the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is about how organised Islamism operates in states where Muslims are in a minority. And that is obviously happening in the United Kingdom, where Muslims are a substantial minority of the population. And the point that I was making was that this has happened throughout society. It's happened in academia, it's happened in school teaching, in all of the professions. And of course, the civil service reflects society, and it's happened also in the civil service. And a lot of it is to do with some of the things that you should or should not talk about. It's affected the field, particularly of counter-terrorism. And you'll be familiar with the Shawcross review of the Prevent strategy, where there was, he clearly found that there had been an attempt to play down the Islamist threat and to play up other terrorist threats or other extremist threats. And what this reflects is a gradual chilling of free expression of concern about these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet shouting, bigot or Islamophobia at people when people have legitimate, realistic fears about an ideology which was responsible for the vast majority of terror threats and terror deaths in this country. That's not a phobia. A phobia is an irrational fear. This is a very, very sensible, reasonable fear, and it's a fear that is shared in many Muslim countries as well. And your comments, you decided to speak out after the Telegraph revealed that Foreign Office staff had attended an event at the Iranian embassy in London, and it was an event to celebrate the Islamic Revolution. Interesting choice to go there, just weeks after the massacre of tens of thousands of young people on the streets of Iran, and a very senior staff were there. I think people were saying, look, that's part of our job, we have to go to events of regimes we might not approve of, but there was a general view that actually this event was of a different kind. And it was more of it wasn't just a reception that you would attend to keep your contacts. This was almost endorsing this celebration of a regime which has murdered its own citizens, and that was felt to be something that was beyond the pale. It's the fact that perhaps I imagine there was no debate in the Foreign Office about whether or not they should even go to this event.
Well, of course, we don't know what debate there was, but it was absolutely tone deaf to go in the way that they did. I have a long career in diplomacy, and I've been to events hosted by countries that we disagree with. But we have plenty of rules and also precedent for how we gradate that sort of attendance. And with a lot of adversaries, we actually boycott their National Day celebrations. In the case of Iran, the fact that their National Day celebration celebrates the Islamic Republic, which was the beginning of them declaring war on the West, and starting talking about death to America, and then, of course, taking out a contract, hit contract on a British author. Yep. It's extraordinary that we would not always have regarded the Iranians as either to be handled, if you like, to be touched with a very long stick, or not to be touched at all.
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, a lot of the coverage, I think, well, I mean, I've found, frankly, a lot of the BBC and I would say Sky as well. I don't see so much of ITV, but their coverage of the October the 7th massacre and the subsequent war in Gaza, I found genuinely, utterly shocking and deeply repulsive, frankly, and uninformative and I mean, I think just blatantly untrue, a lot of it. And then we've also had the coverage of the Iran war and a lot of talk about how, you know, and we've seen this even in criticism within Trump's own regime in America about, you know, this is, you know, the Israeli hand is controlling all of this, seems to be the issue. We've had criticism from John Simpson of the BBC of the decision to sort of kill this Iranian security chief who basically ordered the murder and the massacres in the streets of ordinary Iranian youngsters protesting for some basic civil rights peacefully in January, and talking about how he was a very clever and very reasonable man. Later deleted it because, you know, he thought it'd been misinterpreted. But of course, it wasn't misinterpreted, was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't misinterpreted, and there's been a lot of criticism and a lot of inquiries also about the coverage, particularly of the Gaza war. As you say, we're now seeing it with the Iran war as well. But in the case of the Gaza war, the BBC has had to apologise again and again for bias in its coverage. The same is true of the Canadian state broadcaster. You can also say of a number of other broadcasters. CNN has been pretty bad at times. And one of the interesting things in all of this is these organisations are all on good terms with Al Jazeera, the Qatari state-owned propaganda channel, which of course, you know, it has the appearance of being a very sophisticated news channel. It has all of the resources and all of the correspondence. And sometimes it makes reports which are really well researched and well presented. But it systematically pursues an Islamist and pro-Qatari agenda.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is the same as Russia Today and people who justify it, the Jeremy Corbyns and others who've justified appearing on Russia Today. It's like, oh, well, that no one interferes at all with anything that I say and it's perfectly, you know, reasonable commentary and reporting. No, they do that as the cover for everything else they do, and you're basically giving succor to them. Why do you think this has happened, though, in terms of the capture of this sort of Islamist, I mean, again, pro-Islamist ideology effect? This sort of, a lot of this is down to, I think, whether it's in the civil service and the BBC, the NHS, all the other professions, academia. A lot of this is down to just a general woke agenda, which is there's a hierarchy of power, the oppressors and the oppressed, and some point Muslims became the ultimate oppressed people on the planet, along with trans people, interestingly. And at some point Jews went from being the most oppressed to the biggest oppressor. A lot of this, we know, came out of Soviet Union. The issue of the Jews in Israel, a lot of this was Soviet Union propaganda for many, many years. But how did this become so endemic in pretty much every profession, every quango, every organisation, the heart of our government, our academia? How did that happen?
I think it was just, it was really a misunderstanding, I think, of minorities. You know, you have minorities, a number of minorities in the United Kingdom. You've got Hindu minority, a Sikh minority, and many, many others. And in some way, the Muslim community has been patronized. It's been treated as something different. And I sometimes think that some of the worst of this is really the way that it's actually affecting Muslims. Yeah. If you talk about Islamophobia, you mentioned this sort of this extraordinary misstep that the government is making in sort of codifying Muslims as being a community uniquely in need of coddling and protection. Yeah. But who is it they're protecting? The people they're protecting are actually the self-appointed community leaders who bully ordinary Muslims. And if you're a young Muslim girl in Britain who aspires to be free and successful, and the British government is actually making apologies for a patriarchy that keeps you down, it's is extraordinary. So you get completely inverted priorities. And you talked about the sort of hierarchy of oppression stuff. That is, again, absolutely crazy stuff. So if you're part of the Jewish community, and here we have a real problem with anti-Semitism, which has shown itself to be rife in the Western world, and Jews just can't win because they're supposed to be colonialists and oppressors, and they're sort of regarded as white oppressors. And I think that in this respect, that what we're doing is we're sort of displacing our own colonial guilt. So if we feel bad about sort of something that we perhaps did in our imperial days, 70 years ago, we now are trying to hold Israel responsible for that.
Yeah, it's quite bizarre, isn't it? Just finally, briefly, if you would, Edmund Fisher-Brown, you're speaking out, and my goodness, we appreciate that you have. Are you a lone voice? Are you just one of very, very few, perhaps, in the civil service who are concerned about this, or do you think that actually there are many more like you, like there may be, in every organisation, in academia, or even at the BBC, where people are just too afraid to speak out?
No, I know for a fact that there are many, many more like me, including those who are still in the civil service, including people I know in the BBC, including people I know in academia. Of course, the problem here is, I have the luxury of speaking out because I'm no longer a civil servant. I'm no longer subject to government discipline. And I'm again, I have a think tank career now in which I can speak my mind without fear of consequences. But what I have seen very clearly, both in the civil service and in a whole range of professions, is people who think this way but are afraid to say it because it's career death to be accused of Islamophobia.
Absolutely. I hope you'll come on again. Great to talk to you. Edmund Fisher-Brown, former British diplomat. Thank you for that. Tom Slater, your response?
Well, I think it's just a really important reminder that at a time when the biggest extremism threat we face is coming from Islamist extremism, at a time when, if we're being honest, the biggest sort of segregation, sectarian problem that we're experiencing in multicultural Britain is amongst sections of the British Muslim population. Now is the time in which we're cracking down on Islamophobia. Now is the time in which there is an enormous taboo about even talking about these issues. I do think future historians will look back and wonder why these really deep problems, deep threats within our midst weren't, not only were they not dealt with, we went out of our way to pretend they weren't happening.
Again, I just don't think the British people are going to put up with that anymore, and I do not think the British people are bigoted. I don't think they're Islamophobic. That's ridiculous phrase. I think people have got genuine, legitimate concerns. I think we've got a leadership of the ordinary Muslims in this country who are very much a problem. Self-appointed, a lot of them. I think a lot of ordinary Muslims are going to have to start speaking out. They're going to have to start saying, no, this does not represent us. We just want to come here, just want to be British, have a normal life here, and just carry on with our daily lives like everyone else. But, until we have that, I think we are going to continue to have a problem. 11:49 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. We'll get your calls after the top of the hour, 0344 499 1000. Taking PMQs live, of course, midday. Peter Cardwell will be here to help with the analysis. First up, though, we take a break, and then we're going to be talking about the latest on meningitis outbreak, which is now a national incident with 20 cases. What should we be worried about and how much? This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:52 is the time. Let's talk more about that meningitis outbreak. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said that he is worried, he said, about this meningitis outbreak. We've now got the number of confirmed cases up from 15 to 20. It's been confirmed by the UK Health Security Agency this morning. 2 young people, a sixth form pupil and a student at the University of Kent, have died as a result of the outbreak. We've got a case in London now, so it spread from Kent to London. We know one case was identified in France as well from an exchange student. We've also got a 9-year-old baby among those in hospital as well. I mean, a 9-month-old, absolutely terrifying. Let's talk about this with Dr. Lawrence Buttman. He's a GP, former chair of the BMA GPs Committee. Good morning to you, Lawrence.
Morning.
This reminds me of those days every morning when we used to speak and discuss what was going on with COVID. Look, we've seen a load of people with masks, so it must be serious, even though it's not an airborne disease, which made me a bit confused. But how worried should young people be? How worried should parents be for their young children, or indeed their children at sixth form or university?
If you get meningitis, you should be extremely worried. Otherwise, you don't need to worry terribly much because your risk of catching it is quite small if you're not in close proximity to people who are carrying meningitis.
And what does close proximity mean?
Next to or very close to and breathed over.
Okay, so it is airborne, but we've been told it's that's why students pass it on. They're all snogging, they're sharing drinks, they're sharing vapes.
Right. It's only if you're very close or kissing or sharing vapes. You wouldn't get it crossing the other side of the street. You're not going to get it walking along the street. You won't catch it like that.
You're going to get it sitting next to someone on the bus?
Almost certainly not, unless you're remarkably friendly.
OK, right. Yeah, I'm not that friendly with people on the train. OK. But, I mean, we know that if you do get it, it is very, very serious. And one of the issues we've had is people simply not realising, because we all know about meningitis and the rash. And again, that's when my daughter had a scare. That was first alerted us, and she didn't have it in the end. But you have a rash, you put the glass on it, you press down, and if the rash disappears, it's probably fine. If the rash doesn't go, that is a get straight to hospital moment, isn't it?
Yes, but I wouldn't wait for the rash.
That's the crucial bit, yeah.
Is a late sign and really is not much use. Clearly, if you have a non-blanching rash, a rash that doesn't change when you put a glass on top of it, that clearly is an emergency and you should go straight to hospital. Yeah. Make sure when you get to hospital, they know that you might have meningitis, so they don't put you in the waiting room with everybody else.
No, indeed. But the key things to look out for, we're told, just simply feeling unwell, a bad headache, a stiff neck. Those are much more the early signs. But again, one of the worries, of course, especially with the student population, after apparently going to this chemistry nightclub on 3 different nights in early March, is that one of the symptoms could be confused with a hangover. So easy for those early symptoms to have been missed.
Remarkable tiredness, drowsiness, feeling that your head hurts badly, but also it hurts all over, and you can't look at light.
Light is part of it, OK.
Stiff neck, and very often the stiff neck is the first thing.
Right. But that's the key thing, is identifying it early. And what do you make of the UK HSA, the Health Security Agency, by all accounts on Friday identifying there might be a cluster of cases, contacting doctors but not telling the public? No effort to contact students until Sunday evening, so well after the weekend's festivities and snogging and vape sharing and drink sharing. But also, when they did contact the chemistry nightclub, which they think was, basically ground zero of this outbreak, they contacted them by, an unverified social media handle, as opposed to going there, finding the owners and seeing if they could track people down. That seems to me to be a pretty basic failure of the Health Security Agency, isn't it?
Yes, well, I'm not going to defend them, only to say that what happened in this weekend is what would normally happen in a meningitis outbreak. It's not enough for various other illnesses, but meningitis tends to spread quite slowly. Yeah. In that you've got time. It's not like COVID when you can infect an entire room with one cough. It's not like that.
Right. And it can be a 2-week incubation period. So a lot of these students, they may have got infected or affected someone else, not realise. Because presumably there are people who, I know 10% of people carry the meningitis virus, bacteria in them, 20% or something in younger people. They could have caught it and not had any symptoms?
Yes.
And then spread it elsewhere.
It's very easy to catch it, have no symptoms whatsoever, although it could be found on a throat swab, and then to give it to somebody else whose immunity is not quite as good, and then those people go from just having it in their throat where it does no harm at all to getting it in their bloodstream when it's extremely dangerous.
Right. So University of Kent closed down exams, closed down all the social events, social student union. All the students who are heading off in a couple of weeks for Easter holidays, they've left early, having possibly taken the infection back. We've now got an infection in London. I mean, again, this is now a national incident. I mean, it seems to me that everything that should have happened has been the wrong thing to have happened, surely.
I would have said things have been rather slow.
You're being generous.
Not that they haven't been done properly, but everything's been a little bit too slow. And I suppose because if there's only 1 or 2 cases, you don't get the breeze up you quite as much as if there are 20 cases where it's now a big deal.
Yeah.
Clearly there will be other cases. I'd be amazed if it's limited to this.
Well, those are the ones who are in hospital that have been identified, and no one else would have had the testing. But again, don't you act when there's 2 cases so you don't end up with 20?
Well, you would have thought so. I think that it might have been a quick move to give out the preventative antibiotics rather quicker, because whenever I've been in a situation where I've diagnosed meningitis, everyone who's been anywhere near the patient has been taking the preventing antibiotics immediately. Yeah. You don't want to wait and see whether you're going to be the unlucky one.
Yeah. And again, because at the end of the day, and again, unlike COVID, this for young people is a deadly disease, and it does have and people losing limbs. I mean, those of us who've met people who've gone through this is a horrific disease. Take it seriously. If in doubt, get to the doctor. Be very clear about what you believe. You believe it's meningitis. Lawrence Buttman, always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Tom, I say again, I want to know how many staff at the UK Health Security Agency work at home on a Friday.
No,
because I reckon this is what's going to be the issue.
You can't take the weekend off.
No, exactly. It's not a weekendy off kind of job. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts on all that. Get in touch on anything we've been talking about, including Angela Rayner. And next best hope for the Labour Party, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, Prime Minister's questions. We'll be taking it live and getting analysis from Tom and from Peter Cardwell. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connection device, thanks for having you join us. Lots to talk about. In just a couple of moments, we're going to go to PMQs live to those first exchanges, particularly between the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition. A few other questions to the Prime Minister before that. We're joined live in the studio right now by Tom Slater from Spiked Online and now by Peter Caldwell.
Hello, Julia.
Of course, our presenter here. And I say congratulations. I haven't got to see you in person. So congratulations on your regular evening
thank you very much indeed.
About sodding time, frankly, sir. You're going to be taking over today. This is very confusing. You're going to be on at 1.
Yes.
Because everyone's swapped around because JK's off for family reasons. So you're going to be
I'm
doing
after
Ian.
you.
You're Ian. Ian was JK. I've completely lost
Mark
track.
Dolan's me.
Mark Dolan's you.
identifying as me.
I'm still me. I'm going to stay as me. We've got so much to talk about. I mean, just before Kemi Badenoch comes on, really briefly, what do you think she's going to ask about? Is it going to be Iran?
It has to be Iran, but also Angela Rayner's comments
Gotta
as well.
Be a bit
Does the Prime Minister agree with his former deputy when she says ...
Let's see if we get those words. Tom Slater?
No, I think that's got to be the attack. That's a bruise that you can't help but punch.
Especially because Iran's a bit difficult for her, isn't it? Because he last week, even though she wasn't asking about Iran at all, it was about fuel duty and things. The Prime Minister who was answering an entirely separate set of questions. It was quite the most bizarre thing. It's like, are you two in the same time zone even? You're talking about different stuff. But he kept telling her off for shilly-shallying and messing about on Iran.
And she's been critical of Trump, actually, within the last 48 hours as well.
She defended the Prime Minister. Let's go straight over live with the first question to Keir Starmer.
Stand up and apologise.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister tried to avoid scrutiny on the Mandelson files by releasing the documents immediately after Prime Minister's questions last week. So let me ask him now. Did the Prime Minister personally speak to Peter Mandelson about his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein before appointing him as our ambassador to Washington?
Yes or no? Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me start where I must. This was my mistake in making the appointment, and I've apologised to the victims of Epstein. I do so again. The government is complying with the humble address in full, but we are also continuing to support the police in their investigation. The matter of process was looked at by the independent advisor on ministerial standards. It's clear the appointment process wasn't strong enough, and that's why I've already strengthened it. But it was my mistake, Mr. Speaker, and I've apologised for it. She should follow suit and apologise for a gross error of judgment in calling for the UK to join the war in Iran without thinking through the consequences.
Mr. Speaker, I know he doesn't want to talk about the documents he tried to bury last week. He's going to try and talk about anything else, but he's not going to get away with it. I asked him a question he did not answer. We know the Prime Minister was warned about the risk of appointing Peter Mandelson. This is not about the process. He knew that Mandelson stayed in Epstein's house after Epstein had been convicted for child prostitution. He knew that. So I will ask him again. Did he speak to Peter Mandelson about this before the appointment, yes or no?
Yes. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've already made clear that he was asked questions and gave untruthful replies. The government is complying with the humble address. The process has been set out. The independent advisor has looked at it. And he said, quote, the relevant process for a political appointee was followed. Now, obviously, this is a question of my judgment, but what about her judgment? She wanted to rush into a war with Iran without thinking it through. At the weekend, Mr. Speaker, three weeks in, she said, oh, there isn't a clear plan behind the US strikes in Iran. That's the question she should have asked at the start. The decision to commit the UK to a war is the biggest decision a Prime Minister can take, and she got it completely wrong.
I didn't hear an answer, Mr. Speaker, and he's right. It is about his judgment. He has repeatedly told us that Peter Mandelson lied to him, but he won't tell us if he actually picked up the phone and spoke to Mandelson before appointing him. This doesn't make any sense. The Prime Minister told us on the record, and I quote, I believed the lies he told me. If the Prime Minister didn't speak to him, how can he say he lied to him?
Prime Minister. Speaker, the process is clear. It's been looked at by the independent advisor. And she asked me about the process and judgment on appointments. She appointed the Shadow Justice Secretary. He said last night that Muslims praying in public, including the Mayor of London, practising his faith, are not welcome. He described it as an act of domination, straight from the Islamist playbook. If we're in my team, he'd be gone. It's utterly appalling. She should denounce his comments and she should sack him.
He wants to talk about justice secretaries. His justice secretary is abolishing jury trials. My shadow justice secretary is defending British values. I know who I would rather have sitting on the front bench next to me, and it's not him. But Mr. Speaker, this is important. He does want to talk about anything else except what I'm asking him. 3 times I have asked him if the Prime Minister spoke to Peter Mandelson. 3 times he has refused to answer. We can only assume he did not speak to Peter Mandelson. From the documents published, we know he left the questioning of Mandelson's relationship with a convicted paedophile to 2 of Mandelson's closest friends, one of whom was also friends with a convicted paedophile. Asking those questions should have been his job. Why did he fail to do his duty?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, so her position is that the Shadow Justice Secretary is defending British values when he says Muslims praying together in Trafalgar Square are not welcome. Mr. Speaker, even Tommy Robinson, I can hardly believe I'm saying this, has said today that if the Shadow Justice Secretary had made these hateful comments 2 years ago, the Conservative Party would have kicked him out. Now, Tommy Robinson isn't some sort of moral signpost. He was pointing out how much their party has changed. They're more inclined to his views, and he's right about that. The fact that he's sitting on her front bench shows she's too weak and has got absolutely no judgment.
The Prime Minister wants to talk about my leadership. I'm shocked because his former deputy has just fired the starting gun on the race to replace him. And I'll tell him one thing. She and I both agree that this weak man should be replaced by a strong woman. But I'm not finished, Mr. Speaker. I have too much to say to him. There is still a lot to ask. There is still a lot to ask about the Mandelson files. There's still a lot to ask. The Prime Minister knew that Mandelson had kept up a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The documents released also show he'd been warned about appointing Mandelson. He claims he was lied to. Mandelson had twice been fired for dishonesty. So why did the Prime Minister believe Peter Mandelson over the vetting documents?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, she asked about leadership. When I see religious events in Trafalgar Square, when I see Hindus celebrating Diwali, when I see Jews celebrating Hanukkah live, when I see Christians performing the Passion of Christ, or Muslims praying, that shows the great strength of our diverse city and country. I've never heard her party call out anything other than the Muslim events. It's only when Muslims are praying. The only conclusion is the Tory party has got a problem with Muslims.
Can I just say, people say, I am not responsible for the answers. I've just got to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a shame he's not responsible for the answers either. The Prime Minister wants us to believe that he is a serious leader, but he doesn't do the work. He outsources the decisions, and when things go wrong, he blames the vetting, he blames the Chief of Staff, he blames the Cabinet Secretary, he blames anyone but himself. This Prime Minister appointed Peter Mandelson, but didn't bother to ask the questions. If he cannot be straight with the House on something as simple as this, why should we believe a word he says about anything?
She talks about doesn't do it. 3 weeks ago, she said we should rush into war. She didn't do the work. She didn't think through the consequences. Committing our military to a war without thinking through the consequences is the gravest mistake a leader of the opposition can ever. And she comes back a week later and says, oops, I got that one wrong. She's utterly irrelevant, and she's got no judgment. This is the leader of the opposition who said I should have empty-chaired the most important NATO summit in years. These are the opposition who said Greenland is a second-order issue. And this is the leader of the opposition who jumped into a war with Iran without stopping to think. On top of that this week, the failure to condemn and sack...
Order. And I will repeat again, I'm not responsible for the answers, but it's certainly not opposition questions.
Mr. Speaker, add to that the failure to condemn and sack the Shadow Justice Secretary for the poison and division that he spreads. It's turning out to be quite a month for the Leader of the Opposition, who claims she never makes any mistakes.
Mr. Speaker. Right, well, what a feisty exchange that was, and exchange between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, and interesting, touching on a lot of the topics we've been talking about today. Very interesting, I think, that her first few questions, in fact, if you kept going back to it actually the whole way through, was about Peter Mandelson. And an interesting point, Prime Minister thought he could escape basically being questioned about it because the documents were deliberately released, who will be kidding, deliberately released after Prime Minister's questions last Wednesday. He thought he could avoid it, and she asked her questions about it. And the same question again and again and again. Did the Prime Minister speak personally with Peter Mandelson? Because he has said, and she quoted it, and this is the thing that's been very confusing, he was very, very, very clear that he had said, I believed the lies he told me. And yet it does seem to have emerged from the documents that we've seen that at no point did he speak to the man who was appointing as ambassador, in which case, had he lied to the House of Commons? Peter Cardwell, I mean, she also went on Angela Rayner, but let's talk about the issue of Peter Mandelson. She wasn't going to let him get away with not being scrutinised.
Good for her for doing this.
And I've got to be honest with you, he looked very slippery on this one.
Well, he was. She asked him a direct question 3 times.
Yeah. Yes
and said,
or no.
Did you or did you not speak to Peter Mandelson before you appointed him about Epstein? Also, we know that this deliberate strategy of releasing the files directly after PMQs, thinking there's no way she'll do it next week, then she does, and good for her for doing that, because there has to be scrutiny on the Prime Minister. Yeah. It's good to see him being slippery on this, because that displays what his views are. I think also how he showed his slipperiness was talking about the Muslim issue that Nick Timothy brought up, which is a perfectly legitimate issue for a Member of Parliament to bring up. Well, and then she starts comparing the Conservative Party to the views of Tommy Robinson. Absurd.
Well,
Absolutely absurd.
I don't know. I mean, I think that was a very good move for him to bring that up. I want to come back to that in a moment. I just want to get Tom Slater's thoughts. So he's Tom Slater, from editor of Spiked Online, has been joining me throughout the show. The Prime Minister, and again, Prime Ministers, we always say, they don't answer the questions. I mean, none of them ever do. Yeah. And when they do suddenly answer a question yes or no, it's always a little bit of a shock, and we all go, what the hell just happened there? And indeed, the questioner's normally like, I wasn't preparing, I'm going to get back to my notes. But if you don't answer that question, that's a simple, did you not speak to Peter Mandelson beforehand? When you said he lied to you and you believed him? Well, then, so you either did or you didn't. I mean, it's just, why doesn't he answer that question?
Because he knows that he's on a sticky wicket here. I mean, we're used to Keir Starmer and many Prime Ministers not answering questions, so he just started asking his own questions. He took the Prime Minister's questions almost too literally. And I think it's because he knows that he can only hide behind process now. He can only hide behind...
My mistake.
Exactly. And yes, there's an element of fessing up there, but it's also just attempting to defend the indefensible, really. Yeah. And I think, therefore, it was very savvy of Kemi Badenoch not to go on this, because there's no good answer.
And it's not just about the appointment of this one man to this one job, and this is about his judgment.
Absolutely.
Again and again and again. And you'd forgive a bit of poor judgment. Oh, look, this guy is a known liar, lied to you. But again, but you had vetting and you had the warnings and you chose not. His whole shtick was, if I'd known then what I know now, I wouldn't have appointed him, is what he said last September.
The reason he appointed Peter Mandelson was because, again, Morgan McSweeney thought it was a good idea. It's not that he has bad judgment, he has no judgment, he outsources judgment, and this is another example of that.
This is one of the things that's come out, actually, isn't it, Peter Cardwell? Tim Shipman, now the Spectator, former political editor of the Sunday Times, and he's done some, fantastic coverage of this. Really a long read a couple of weeks ago about talking to lots of senior figures in government. We're talking about, cabinet ministers, he was specialist. He has access, he talks to people. And basically, to a man and a woman, they're saying, Keir Starmer has just got no interest in governing. He's got no interest in research, in making decisions. He clocks off at 6 o'clock on a Friday. He doesn't make a single phone call to anybody, until the meeting on Monday morning. There's no, hey, I want to talk to you about this. This is urgent. Just literally, just seems to have remarkably little interest in being Prime Minister.
And also, if you read the extracts as well of Gabriel Pogrund and Patrick Maguire's book, updated now as well, get in, well worth the read, they're talking about how much time he spends reading. He reads everything, and then he just doesn't say anything. He doesn't have any opinion on what he's read. It is absurd. Even when he was talking to...
It's just an empty vessel.
And when he was talking to President Trump previously as well, he said, are you going to do this? Are you going to support us or not support us? And he said, I'll have to talk to my team. I mean, it's a good idea to talk to senior military figures before making a decision, but nonetheless, it shows yet again that Keir Starmer is not a conviction politician. He doesn't believe anything.
Yeah, it's not a question. We've nothing to disagree with because she doesn't believe anything. He reminds me very much of Theresa May. A lot of people thought, they had convictions, but it turns out, she shilly-shallied on Brexit. Everyone believed she was a Brexiter. Then she supported the Remain campaign. Then she said she pushed it through. That she actually didn't. I'm sure a perfectly nice person. Keir Starmer, a perfectly nice person, but just didn't really know why she was Prime Minister.
It's really interesting you mentioned that about Theresa May, who's probably the Prime Minister I know best, because a lot of what they do is they're fine until they're Prime Minister. They're in the bunker. Yeah. They've got everybody looking at them, and they're afraid to move in any direction because no matter how they move, they'll be criticised.
Do you know what? Somebody who was very close to a former Prime Minister said this to me. What they said, the thing about being Prime Minister is you have to make 50 decisions every single day, no matter what, and at least 2 of those are going to be wrong. And if you're so fearful of that you can't make any decisions, that's why Gordon Brown was a terrible Prime Minister. You're going to make decisions, and some of them are going to be wrong. Well, Keir Starmer clearly has made a terrible decision on this. His big hit back, Tom Slater, was about, what about you in Iran? But this is what he did last week, basically saying you didn't make the right judgment. But that doesn't quite work, does it? Because no one thinks he made the right judgment because he'd really thought things through. He just didn't make a decision in time.
No, he didn't make a decision, and also he wanted, seemingly, to allow US use of our RAF bases earlier, but couldn't get it through his own cabinet. So again, the weakness that shot through that response, the equivocation is so clear. So for him to suggest that he is making the principled, clear stance and that Kemi Badenoch is all over the place just doesn't wash. No, even though Kemi Badenoch has, embarrassed herself a little bit from now coming out so strongly against Trump, recognising where public opinion is. Again, people are going to remember primarily his weakness on this question.
I really don't want our political leaders to be going with what public opinion thinks on things. On this. I mean, other than, public opinion have told you we don't want to have mass immigration. Well, OK, fine, or we don't want net zero. But I'm thinking, on issues like war, people going, I'm afraid I'm anti-war. Well, we're all anti-war, but sometimes we have to have a war.
But Julia, didn't you listen to Keir Starmer the other day? He said he's acting out of principle.
Oh, good point.
It's good enough for me.
If he says it, it must be true.
It must be true. Come back to you. You got a bit cross about this, Peter Cardwell. This dig that the Prime Minister made about the Shadow Justice Secretary, called the Shadow Home Secretary throughout the show. Apologies for that, because he used to work in the Home Office when I first met him. But Nick Timothy, Shadow Justice Secretary, he took over from Jenrick when he moved over to Reform, and he's a good player. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Nick Timothy. He speaks out on these things, and he's been very critical of this mass prayer event in Trafalgar Square as part of Ramadan. Kemi Badenoch made a great dig back about, his Justice Secretary is ending jury trials. So, and she says, it was very interesting, she says that mine is defending British values. Now, we wanted to speak to Nick Timothy today, not doing a media round. I wondered if we've been told off. But Keir Starmer he basically was saying that, this is, the Conservative Party has a problem with Muslims. Now, I'm not entirely sure, got to be honest with you, whether that's going to be a vote loser for Kemi Badenoch at this current moment in time. But what do you make of him bringing that up?
I think it's perfectly legitimate to say, actually, is this a good idea to have
Nick Timothy
to bring this up? If you want a conviction politician, Nick Timothy is your man. Keir Starmer is not your man. Nick Timothy's not going to get it right every single time, but I think he's right on this one. I do think Trafalgar Square should be used for big religious events if people want to do that. I've been to events supporting the Jewish community, for example, in Trafalgar Square. That's fine. But the fact that this happened, the fact that the Mayor of London took part in this...
Well, then what's the difference if it's Muslims?
Well, if...
You're either saying it can be available for... You can either say we're a Christian country, we are constitutionally still legally a Christian country, they're only for Christian events, OK, that's fine. But there would be legitimacy to that. Or there are no religious events. But if there are religious events, you can't say, apart from this one religion, well, the Muslims and the Scientologists don't get to do it. But as Nick Timothy pointed out, you know, a lot of people are too polite to say something, but a lot of people will have looked at that event and gone, I'd feel uncomfortable about that.
And that's fine. And just because people feel uncomfortable doesn't mean things shouldn't go ahead. But the point is that I would love to hear the Prime Minister speaking up a lot more for the Jewish community. I'd love to hear him speak up.
But that's whataboutery.
OK. But I do.
You think that Nick Timothy was right to say what he said? I think the Prime Minister was wrong to call that out?
I think it's fair for Nick Timothy to make a point to say, should this have happened in Central London?
He's saying it shouldn't have happened. Whereabouts you?
Well, I think it's entirely legitimate to criticise Islam if you find certain Islamic practices questionable. And this is the root of the problem. I thought Keir Starmer's comments there about if he was my Justice Secretary, he would be out the door, was more revealing than he realised. It shows that within the Labour Party there is a complete omerta around these issues. And of course, this should be the start of a debate. People saying, well, where is the line drawn? In precisely the way that you say, are we suggesting that there should be no religious celebrations here? Are we suggesting that the character of this is slightly different? Is it, as Nick Timothy suggests, so bound up in the way in which Islamists in particular, as distinct from just quietist British Muslims, that it's used as an expression of domination? Should that change how we feel about it? Let's have that discussion. But the response is just, you should have said that you're racist and so on. So that's got us into such a mess, and therefore I think seeing Kemi Baden not stick by her man in that perspective is encouraging sign.
I thought it was very interesting today. We got the Prime Minister quoting Tommy Robinson and basically saying, look, this had been said really a few years ago. That was. I thought there was a lot of floundering by a Prime Minister who wasn't, steady on his feet. I'm going to say once again, I've said this very often, genuinely, you would not want that man as your barrister in court if you were accused of a crime. Whether it's one you've done or not done, I'm leaving my options open. Leaving my options open. Seriously, you would look at him and go, whoa, do you know what? Hey, excuse me, Your Honour, I'll represent myself. I think I'm fancying a chance.
Justice for JHB. That's what I say.
Seriously, I mean, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time.
Those cases are coming.
It's only. I mean, everyone knows that, you know. But you know, we're going to stand firm on the freedom of speech issue, though. Brilliant to have you now. So you're going to be back at 1 o'clock. So
yes.
We won't bother having another chat with you. You could just come in at your will during the news. I'll promise I'll clean up nicely for you. Piece of carpet out while we're all stopping around because no one knows what's happening. But you know, we'll have a good time. Tom Slater's staying with me. We're going to get to your calls up next. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch.
DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. It's 12:26. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me. Let's get straight to your calls coming in on all the different topics we've been talking about. 0344 499 1000. We'll get some of your texts and tweets as well about Angela Rayner first. Vicky says, I'm asking about Angela Rayner launching a direct challenge to Keir Starmer's leadership, brought up by Kemi Badenoch at PMQs. Rayner says Labour is running out of time to change course. Good line from Kemi Badenoch. She says, Angela Rayner and I agree on one thing. She says, we both agree this weak man should be replaced by a strong woman. Quite a good line, I thought. Vicky says, from the fire pan to the fire. Jean says, Angela Rayner became the very thing she purported to despise. If a Tory minister did what she did, she would be shouting Tory scum again. This is not paying her full stamp duty. She became sleazy like all the rest. Quentin says, the horse has bolted. The Greens will take their votes now and the working class will leave them. They've been diabolical and authoritarian. George says, we don't need more of the same thing. This country needs a complete change in leadership. Frankly, we need to rethink the role the government plays in running this country. Running out of time, says Gary. They've already run out of time. It's over for them. And Ellie says, who doesn't want a gobby yob who doesn't pay her dues? But there we are. It's very interesting, actually. Angela Rayner earning £100,000 in speeches from speaking arrangements, and engagements, and her memoir as well since leaving office. Interesting, she does call herself a socialist, definitely a socialist, she said in 2020. And only 3 years ago, she said, being an MP isn't a second job, it is the job. Labour will put an end to this racket. So, again, hypocrisy. Let's go to the phone lines on, interesting, that conversation that brought up by the Prime Minister at PMQs, and this is a criticism led by the Shadow Justice Secretary, Tory MP Nick Timothy, of this mass prayer event by Muslims as part of Ramadan and the end of their fast before their iftar feast in Trafalgar Square, led by the London Mayor, Sadiq Khan, yesterday. Grace, who's in London, wants to have her say on that. Good afternoon to you, Grace. What do you want to tell us?
Well, I don't tend to disdain Sadiq Khan as much as many other people who listen to this station do, but I don't think that this was the right thing to be doing. It brings to my mind immediately a verse in the Bible in which Jesus, who I would think Muslims might revere to some extent because they claim that he's a prophet, he said that you shouldn't pray in public to be seen by others. You know, that the point of prayer should be that you're having a conversation with God. You don't do it in a way that's kind of showing off to everyone around you, look how holy I am.
So are you of that view for every religion, not just for Muslims?
Yeah, it should be, surely. And I'm afraid there are some Christians who seem to occasionally forget that Jesus said this. But I would wonder why it is that Muslim people who are partaking in this particular event feel that they need to do it in Trafalgar Square in front of everyone.
Especially as a previous caller pointed out, you know, there are some 60 different mosques in London. I'd say, as an atheist, I thought, again, I defend everyone's right to worship as they choose, but I also don't really want it imposed on me, certainly in a public square. I would say that is imposing it on me. I've got to be honest with you, and I've travelled in various Muslim countries. I find the call to prayer the sound of it so discordant and unpleasant. I'm sorry, I just do. There's various tones that hit my ear that I don't enjoy. I don't want to hear that across central London. I simply don't. Do you think that this is an issue where people are calling out, Islamism, the Muslim Brotherhood and extremist views, rather than just ordinary people who want to show their faith, as other people of other faiths have done many times in Trafalgar Square?
I can't help but feel it's kind of a bit about trying to either show off or to seek to attain some kind of dominance. That's kind of how it comes across. And as a person who believes in God, I think that we don't need to show off to have what we believe to be either true or not. I think that there's reasoning for believing in God, and whether or not that is true isn't determined by whether I'm showing it off to everyone else. So I shouldn't need to show it off like that. If I want to convince people of the truth of my beliefs, and I do, then I need to talk to them about it when they're willing to listen. I can't just kind of make people agree with me through force. And so I'm not quite sure what they think they're
what the purpose of it is. Interesting, Grace. Really thoughtful call. Thank you. Michael's in Corby. Michael, you also want to talk about those Trafalgar Square mass Muslim prayer events. What do you want to say? Afternoon, Michael. Can you hear me? Hello, Michael. Hello. I'm hoping he's on the line. Oh, we've just lost him. What a shame. Well, we'll see if we can try and get him up again. Right now, let me go to competition. Competition time. We're giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday, the 5th of July, with the full Racing Green trackside experience. This is the ultimate setup for race day. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and Village corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock. Listen to find out how you can be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Yep, it is indeed the perfect Silverstone race day experience for any F1 fans, so don't miss out. I'm delighted to say we managed to get Michael and Corby back on the line. Michael, what do you want to say?
Hi there, Julia.
Hi.
I just wanted to say this thing in Trafalgar Square was more of a show of force and dominance than a religious celebration. We have Eid, we have Diwali, we have Easter and various other ones, but for me this was just Islam showing that they now control this country and our people in power.
That's how you interpret it, not just people wanting to just celebrate their faith before this sort of communal meal, iftar meal at the end of a day of fasting during Ramadan.
No, this for me. My outlook on it was this was definitely a show of force and dominance.
And why do you say that?
Why do they need to pray in public?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that about any. I mean, I'm always just find it quite interesting. I suppose it's like why did Jehovah's Witnesses come and knock on my door? But I guess if you believe that I'm going to go to hell if you don't convert me, then you've got a duty to go and do that. Is my guess. But is it because of the concerns that have been written about extremist organisations like the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is their modus operandi?
Yes, this is what they do. Look at what they did with in Syria, Iran as well. Yeah. Back in the late 70s, they did the same thing. They now control lots of our public offices in terms of Ofsted is now run by a Muslim and various other offices.
No, you see, I'm going to stop you there. See, I've got an issue with the fact that there's someone being Muslim. It's like the people who object to someone being Muslim, being in the Reform Party things. I don't think people should have a problem with someone being a Muslim or someone being a Sikh or Christian or an atheist or Jew or anything at all. Those are individual belief systems. That's a very different thing from being concerned about Islamist entryism.
No, and that's fine. I get your point.
But you should make a differentiation.
The man that's running our Ofsted, if you look back at some of his public speaking and some of the things he said about this country in the West and how they are here to overtake and not integrate, it scares you a little bit.
I haven't had a look at that, but that's an issue with someone's views rather than, because let's face it, an awful lot of the apologists for a lot of Islamic extremism in this country, by the way, is actually from atheist people on the left who are non-Muslims.
Well, I think the left are worse than the Islamists, aren't they? They're almost traitors.
I agree with you on that, absolutely. Michael, so appreciate that call. Glad I got you on there. It's Michael in Corby. Going to take a quick break. 12:35 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking to former commander of the US Army in Europe, Ben Hodges, retired Lieutenant General, about where we are with Trump. Doesn't think NATO is needed anymore. His criticisms of Keir Starmer and that resignation of a very senior counter-terrorism official, saying that Iran did not pose a threat to the West. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:37 is the time. Let's turn our attention to, well, small matter of war in the Middle East. Let's talk to the retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He's a former commander of US Army in Europe. A very good afternoon to you, Ben.
Hey, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Just first of all, I suppose, first question, because I know you do a lot of work with NATO and have done for many years. What do you make of Donald Trump's clear view, often widely expressed in Oval Office and in many tweets, that actually, you know what, the US doesn't need NATO anymore? Do you agree with him?
No, of course not. The United States needs forward presence, and we need forward friends. You cannot defend the United States from North Carolina or Texas. And so what NATO has always given the United States, despite the frustrations and failure of many allies to live up to their obligations, it's the basing that we're allowed to have, the intelligence sharing. And the fact is, we don't have enough capability to do everything we need to do. We need allies.
Well, I mean, apart from that, most of NATO is American funding and American military might. How much do you need? I mean, there's been a lot of criticism from Donald Trump, again in the Oval Office when he had Michael Martin, the Irish Taoiseach, in for the St Patrick's Day celebrations, the annual trip that they make, criticising Keir Starmer. Even Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, has been defending Keir Starmer. But it seems that he's got a particular, anger, resentment towards Keir Starmer for failing to help when, Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, Emmanuel Macron, the French President, they seem to have got off pretty much scot-free in terms of criticism. And yet the reality is he's asking for help from the British. Yeah, we should have allowed the use of the Diego Garcia Air Base. Crazy to have it unless we are going to allow it to be used by the US. But other than that, I'm not sure we've got any equipment, any military might that would be any use to the US forces right now.
Well, you put your finger on the problem that UK, which has always had great quality, whether it was the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force, your Great British Army, the intelligence, the quality has always been there. What's not there anymore is the quantity, the real capabilities that are needed. And to be candid, the UK has not done what it needed to do in terms of investing in its defensive capability. And in the international situations, if you don't have confidence in your own military to be able to speak and act with confidence, then I think somebody like President Trump is going to be dismissive, unfortunately. I mean, and he called it out back in his first term in office, didn't he? I think it was 2018, where he just said, that people weren't contributing enough to they weren't, most countries weren't even fulfilling their basic, was it 2% commitment of GDP to be spent on the military. And he called that out, and quite rightly so, but was much mocked for it. But in terms of the Allies' reluctance, whether it's, from far overseas or whether it's here in Europe, to not get involved in this Iran war, have they made the right decision? Well, look, of course, I worry about the safety of our sailors and our airmen that are out there, the other professionals and our Israeli allies. What they're doing is very successful, but it's also very dangerous. And so, of course, I would always want to make sure that we had as much capability on hand to do whatever is required. And most European countries do depend on oil and gas and nitrogen and other product coming out of the Persian Gulf. So there should be an interest in Germany and France and UK in keeping that going. Yeah. Having said that, I can understand why leaders of our European allies are reluctant to follow the United States based on what happened back in 2003 and based on the very inconsistent and incoherent explanations from the Trump administration now about what we're doing and why we're doing it. I mean, the president has not even explained this to the U.S. Congress or the American people. So I could understand why the prime minister or the German Bundeskanzler or the French president would be reluctant to just fall in line with whatever the U.S. wants. And yet we're told, again, there's been a lot of talk about regime change, which clearly would be a bonus, but it's very unlike the Afghanistan war and the Iraq war in terms of when Donald Trump made his first statement when the first missiles flew. Most of those actually from Israel, not from America, but that actually this was about basically making Iran, no longer a threat, nuclear threat,
or a military threat to America, to Israel, and indeed to the Middle East. And we've seen what a clear threat it is. We've seen in terms of the funding and the arming of Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and all of the destabilising terrorist attacks throughout the Middle East and indeed in Europe and in America. We've had 20 foiled terror attacks funded by and directed by Iran in recent years alone. And those, goodness knows, those are just the ones we know about. And they clearly are a threat. I mean, at some point, Iran was going to have to be reckoned with. Is your argument that, as we saw from this senior figure, Joe Kent, counterterrorism official who's resigned, he's saying that Iran was not a threat to America, calls on the president to reverse course. Are you saying Iran wasn't a threat or was not a threat now, or that a different action should have been taken?
Well, I think what Mr. Kent said was that it was not an imminent threat. And this is not just some legal technicality. The authority of the president to use force without the Congress declaring war is based on, is there an imminent threat where he has to act? And so this is what Mr. Kent was complaining about, or why he resigned. And I think most people are really skeptical that there actually was an imminent
Really, even though there's conversation apparently in the negotiations, whether it's claimed by Witkoff and Jared Kushner that the Iranians turned up and basically said, look, we've got this much uranium enriched to 60%, enough for 11 nuclear weapons, and there you go. I mean, that alone, surely, it may not be, I mean, it depends what you mean by imminent, weeks, months. I mean, that's close enough for me.
Well, Julia, I'm sorry, you're wrong on this. Okay. Mr. Witkoff and Mr. Kushner are hardly experts on nuclear weapons and nuclear technology. I don't think they're experts
on anything, but other than real estate golf.
this has been part of our problem from the beginning, is that these two characters, were working with the Iranians, and now as we look back, it turns out that they misunderstood what the Iranians were saying or were offering. And it's very clear what imminent means. Imminent means it's happening. I mean, they are getting ready to launch an attack now. But
should America, should Israel wait until the threat is that real and that close before taking action? I mean, if someone says to me, you know what, in a week or two, I'm going to come round and kill you, I'm thinking I might be wanting to take action before a week or two is up.
Okay, so a week, that would be an imminent threat, but not months or years from now, okay? And the whole point is the president has the responsibility to make it clear what is the strategic objective. What are we going to spend bazillions of dollars and put all of our soldiers and sailors at risk to do? Why are we doing this? And then, of course, what we find out that he's got not a very clever negotiating team. It looks like he ran out of patience, and also that he really kind of believed that this would be over 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Decapitation, the people would rise up, and he'd be the great hero, and it'd be like Venezuela. And then here just a few days ago, the president says, well, I was shocked that they actually attacked all the other Gulf states. This is the problem. When you don't consult with the Congress, when you don't make the case to the American people, and then, frankly, to your allies, why we need their help.
But surely it's not about congressional expertise or indeed what allies would say. Surely the Pentagon officials, surely White House strategic thinkers would have been thinking, hey, I'm no expert in this field, Ben. And yet it'd be obvious to me that, Iran has previously on many occasions, and has threatened to do so many occasions as well, shut down the Strait of Hormuz. They should have predicted that would happen. I'm not... I don't know whether they would have been predicted that the other Gulf states would have been attacked, but given the Islamist regime regards them as, also, little Satans, it shouldn't have been that much of a surprise. This was about not listening to the expertise in the administration that exists already, surely.
Now I can agree with you. I guarantee you that every officer at U.S. Central Command that has focused on this region for decades, they all are completely aware of every little tiny island along the edge of the Strait of Hormuz. Yep. They understood. They've war-gamed this many times. The problem is, the Trump administration, not only is there a sort of a hubris, because of the success they had in Venezuela, and to be fair, the enormous amount of combat power that the U.S. Navy and Air Force have put there along with Israel, there's overconfidence, and they just believed it would collapse and we wouldn't have to do all this stuff. And I think Here is a case where the civilian leadership, and by the way, we're paying a price for the administration making decisions to completely restructure the whole National Security Council staff.
Yep.
You've got the Secretary of State is also the National Security Advisor. That's two full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're getting, and look, that's laborious. That is hard government work to work through all these things. But there's a reason that you have these so that you don't launch off into something that you end up regretting later.
Well, we shall see what happens. I don't think there's any point asking you, what do you think is going to happen? I've been asking against that. Let's face it, no one knows, including the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, former commander of the US Army. You're always so good to get your thoughts and your expertise. Tom Slater, this is the interesting thing, isn't it, about sort of, how did they not think this through? But also, it's an element where you think, the hubris of, well, Venezuela went well. Hey, the 12-day war last time round went well. Gaza deal. But this is a problem with the Iranians aren't just fighting a military war, they're also fighting an economic war and a PR war, effectively. Same as Hamas. They fought, they weren't fighting a military war, they were fighting a completely different war on social media, weren't they? No,
exactly. And I think the tendency to put one conflict and act as if all conflicts are the same has been part of the problem here on all sides, really. I mean, the thing about going to war with Iran, it was going to make Iraq look like a tea party, let alone Venezuela, where you've got a very decrepit petro-narco state, where you can just sort of go in, overwhelm their air defences, take away their leader, and that's a relatively straightforward proposition. It's not the case with Iran. I mean, it's dug in. This is the fight for the regime's own survival. They are willing to inflict huge amounts of pain, not just military but economic, on the world in order to make their point. And whilst Donald Trump can go around and say that this was going to be quick and that we're going to get in and out and it'll all be over pretty soon, you don't really get to decide that. There are other players involved. Just because you might prefer that to be the outcome, and American military might is what it is, doesn't mean that you can just expect the other side to just sort of roll over. That's not how these things work.
No,
I think
and
Donald
especially
Trump is
when they're
finding
extremist lunatics.
Quite,
Small
very
point
committed.
Worth making. Tom Slater, thank you very much. Going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about Rachel Reeves claiming that Brexit cost us 8% of our GDP. Has our abacus broken again? Plus why we now have a record 4 million Brits now claiming disability handouts, doubling it in just 7 years. What on earth is going on? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. 12:52 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now. Economics with Jamie Jenkins. He's a former statistician at the Office for National Statistics. Very good afternoon to you, Jamie.
Afternoon, Julia. You all good?
I'm very well. I'm obviously a lot better than 4 million Brits who are apparently on disability handouts. This figure, every time, we talk about this regularly on the show. These figures keep coming out, but the numbers are just rising exponentially. Britain's benefits bill spiralling out of control. Tell us something we don't know. 4 million people now. It's a record-breaking number of people now claiming the main disability payout. This is PIP, Personal Independence Payments, and they've doubled in just the last 7 years. Now, has there been something in the water? Is this all COVID related? What has suddenly happened that we are suddenly a massively disabled, let's face it, a lot of this is mental health, population?
Yeah, well, I don't think you can say that we've seen a doubling in the number of disabled people in the population in the last 7 years, Julia. And I think the IFS did some analysis on this as well, looking at the UK and disability-related benefits compared to some other comparable countries, and they didn't see the same increase. So you can't really put this down to say the cost of living, the pandemic. Other countries have seen significant impact of this. There's got to be something fundamental that's going on in the UK. And you're right, so just over 2 million people in 2019, up to around 4 million people now. And it's a staggering cost. It's forecasting. It's about 29 billion now, going to continue to grow. By the end of the part, 2030, 31, could be 41 billion.
Yeah, these numbers are huge. Yeah. And the key thing here is these people aren't just on this year's bill. Realistically, statistically, once you're on a lot of these benefits, you're on them for life. And not only are you getting benefits, you are not working and paying tax and making your contribution. So you're not even contributing it towards, at some point, your own pension. Like, we are looking at decades of extra billions of spending.
And the kind of the important thing on this is increase has been risen by a lot of younger people in the population. So this is a long-term problem. And I was looking at the data. When they do these reassessments, around 9 in 10 continue to receive the benefits. Yeah. So we need to look at that. There's certain things we need to identify. Now, we want to support people who are genuinely ill. That's the first thing we want to do. But we have to draw some lines here. This isn't the benefit system was a safety net, not a lifestyle. And that's where we've currently got into.
And a lot of the people who talk about this, commentate on this, the hand wringers, are you accusing people of lying? No one would choose to be on these benefits. These people, and they always told the vast majority of these people want to work. Well, they want to have a job that pays 60 grand involving eating chocolate all day. Unfortunately, that job's not available to them because they may not have any qualifications. I don't think that job does exist. If it does, I would love that job, please. But the reality is that, people aren't willing to do the work that is available to them at the qualification level they've got and the skills level they've got. And so they go, do you know what? I'd rather live on benefits for, frankly, as it is often, if you're on PIP, roughly the same amount of money I get on benefits, and no one bothers me every day, and I don't have to get up in the morning, don't have to pay transport, don't have to have office outfits, take my lunch. A lot of people are quids in on these benefits.
No, totally, Julia. And there are some people where the government-owned policies will be impacted on it. So I can imagine if you're a young person, mental health and psychiatric disorders is a key driver of this, Julia. And what we've seen 85,000 payroll jobs gone for the under 25. So the government's own tax policies have been harming jobs for younger people. And that might have that thing where, what am I going to do in life? I can't get a job. I can't at university. I'm struggling to get a job. So you've got to look at the root causes of this. But there's no way that we've seen this massive increase underlying. This is basically, there's not something suddenly happening in the population. This is basically the government being softer in terms of dishing out the benefits.
Yeah, and again, people being interviewed on Zoom, people being able to, use AI or use just Google or just some of these TikTok accounts to say, well, what do I need to say? Oh, I've got depression, I've got anxiety. Yes, I have considered suicide. Tick, tick, tick. There you go. You're on benefits for life. And the thing is, it's not just cruel to taxpayers who are having to work harder and longer to pay not their own bills, but the bills for these people. It's also cruel on particularly the young people, or even people in their 50s. Now, I'm in my 50s. You're getting left on the scrap heap in your 50s, but you're on the scrap heap at 18 or 24. That's it. That's game over.
No, totally. And the best route to kind of prosperity is work, and that's the critical thing. And
to longer living, better health, better happiness. Work is good for you.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I think the government have talked about this week, creating youth jobs and more taxpayers' money to do that. I'd always say it's easy not to actually lose the jobs in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Can I just say, though, there is one person I would like to be out of a job, and that's Rachel Reeves, Rachel from Accounts, whose abacus is clearly broken again. She gave a big speech yesterday afternoon, and she's. I mean, we know that Keir Starmer and her both want to reverse Brexit. Of course they do. They're massive Ramonas. But she called for the UK to start following huge swathes of Brussels rules again. She also claimed that our GDP, our economic output, had been hit to the tune of 8% in the years since we Brexited. I mean, this is just a laughable figure. We'd be going along. I mean, steaming along like the American and the Canadian economies, as opposed to like France and Germany's, if we had Brexited. I mean, what evidence does she have for that absurd claim?
Yeah, you can do any modelling and come up with any evidence you want, Julie. Again, this is absolutely absurd. This is a distraction. This is basically what we've had in the last 2 quarters of last year. 2 quarters of negative growth per head when you look at that, which technically we're in a recession when you look on a per head basis. It's a distraction. They blame Brexit. She will blame Brexit for the decisions that she's caused. Ultimately, she keeps coming out every time saying we're on the right economic plan, but high taxes, we've got job losses, state spending is masking the private sector decline that we see in Julia. And you're right, France and Germany aren't exactly booming along. Not at all. The US are doing really well, but to blame this on Brexit is, again, just a distraction.
Every single thing, people say, well, Brexit's not going very well. You sort of go, well, yeah, I mean, I think we just have the small matter of lockdown and Ukraine war. I think they might have been more relevant to most people's lives and to the economy. And we have no money left and everyone's on benefits. I think that might have had more to do with it. Jamie Jenkins, always so good to talk to you. I do follow him on social media. You know, he knows his stuff. Former